Good afternoon. Today is February 13th, and this is the bill hearings of the Ways and Means Committee. We will start with House Bill 815. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. Very nice to be here. For the record, Delegate Dana Stein in support of House Bill 815. This would increase the value of the public safety volunteer subtraction modification, which is a mouthful to say, from $7,000 to $10,000 for tax years 2025 and beyond. And I know that there's a not insignificant fiscal note, but as you know, the contributions of our public safety volunteers are immense. To qualify for this modification, individual must be an active member of a public safety organization, serve the organization in a volunteer capacity, and have been an active member of the group for at least 3 years out of the past 10 years. Our volunteer firefighters are getting older, and recruiting new volunteers is becoming harder. This would make it easier to recruit new volunteers. It's also worth noting that our public safety volunteers, I'm especially focusing on our volunteer fire police, fire and rescue, and emergency medical service personnel. Every year they make effectively an in-kind contribution to the public safety of our jurisdictions. That's in the range of $65 to $70 million every year. They raise the funds that are needed to operate their stations, purchase the vehicles, and of course there's also the value, which is considerable, of the labor that these volunteers, provide to all of us in the process, saving taxpayers lots of money every year. So based on these factors, I would urge that this increased subtraction modification is modest by comparison. So would urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Stein? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 815, House Bill 700. Delegate Allen.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished colleagues, and Delegate Ebersol. For the record, we're office mates now. We joke. We have fun. All right, for the record, my name is Nick Allen. I'm here to testify in support of my bill, House Bill 700. This is a reintroduction of last year's House Bill 1029, which was itself a reintroduction of a bill from the previous year. So this is my first 3-year bill. This bill, simply put, calls upon additional forms of gambling that have been authorized by the state, specifically sports betting and fantasy sports, to contribute their fair share to the Problem Gambling Fund. It also calls for a comprehensive prevalence study to examine mobile gaming in the state of Maryland. And I want to point out that we have support letters from a number of advocates, but including Maryland Live Casino once again, considering the funding for the Problem Gambling Fund will be coming out of their end, not the state's end. That was the issue with the first iteration of this bill, that it was coming out of the state's end, and it looked like it was actually coming out of the blueprint, and we don't want that. So in summary, this bill increases funding for the Problem Gambling Fund, so we keep pace with all the new ways that the state has authorized and regulates gambling in order to keep pace with the growth of gambling in the state. And I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I urge a favorable report.
Okay, are there any questions? Delegate Buckle?
Madam Chair, so the way we're going to pay for it under this year's iteration is we're going to tax sports wagering licensees. Fantasy operators have a generally fairly small tranche of that money, but the sports wagering licensees will now be receiving only 84% instead of 85%.
Yes.
But you are aware, like the governor's bill or the BRFA that's before us would actually change what the sports gaming operators are paying, I think, from 15% to 30%. So if we enacted your bill and you enacted the BRFA, somehow that would have to be rationalized, because your bill says they pay 84, the BRFA says they're going to pay 70.
Right.
So have you had any ability after, I'm sure you weren't consulted with preparation of the BRFA?
No, unfortunately, I was not.
I would consult you, Delegate Allen. You're a very smart guy, very capable. But have you had any ability to have any follow-up conversations with any of the sports gaming licensees and said, in light of the fact that they're not just losing a point, they're losing 30 points.
Right.
Are they okay with losing an additional point? So now they'd lose 31 points.
No, I have not had those conversations, but I will reach back out to them and I'll circle back and make sure I touch base with the
Yeah,
subcommittee.
and I'm sure they can communicate with us. I just didn't know if there was any because of that change,
Right.
it kind of really changes the purpose of not the purpose
Yeah.
of the bill,
It changes
but it
the
would
math.
change the math of the bill
Yeah.
significantly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you very much.
I appreciate you flagging that. Thank
Okay,
you.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 700, House Bill 797. Delegate Buckle. Oh, that's me. That is you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, Madam Chair, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Delegate Jason Buckle, this is House Bill 797. Like our colleague who just spoke before us, this is a reintroduction of a prior bill that I think generally has been met with some approval from the committee. I won't belabor it. It's Delegate Wilkins and I both have proffered this bill sort of together. She's not here right now. I think that's probably intentional. Now, I'm sure she has something important to be at. But what the bill essentially does, many of you are familiar with, we created the SWARC, the Sports Wagering Application Review Commission, several years ago. We also said that under Maryland law, there would be a fairly substantial amount of potential licenses, both for brick and mortar sports gaming operators and for online licensees. There has been a much smaller amount of actual applicants in that space. There are quite a few legislatively created licenses, or at least the number of licenses that are available, both for brick and mortar. And I will be honest with you, I think that's really my primary intent to the bill. If we ever modified it, we could modify it down primarily for brick and mortar. But there are quite a few licenses that a few years ago this committee and the General Assembly in total believed should have been created to provide opportunities for folks to get into this space. And if they're successful, then obviously they generate revenue for a wide variety of state and local initiatives. The SWARC, on their own initiative, back I believe at the end of 2022, decided, despite the fact that we created the licenses, that they weren't going to accept any more applications. And they've made that pretty clear that they're not accepting any more applications. And last year, if you recall, when individuals with lottery and gaming testified very candidly, we don't get any more applications. And my perspective is if you tell somebody when they get to the front door of your establishment, we're closed, they don't really ask you what's on the menu. They don't ask you if they can come in and sit down and eat if you tell them they're closed when they show up. And that's what the SWARC has decided to do. I think it's contrary to our legislative intent that would allow for these. I don't know if anyone will apply for licenses or not. They may choose to. Delegate Wilkins and I both believe that, small minority and women-owned businesses may be out there who think that they can improve the quality of their business and perhaps generate more revenue for themselves and for the state if they have the opportunity to partner with someone in the sports wagering space. Currently, they're not allowed to even think about that because the SWARC is telling them, don't bother. The legislation says we have licenses. Technically, we're still operating. The SWARC is an entity that has operational capabilities. We've just chosen not to take any more applications. And that's all the bill would do. It doesn't make SWARC award licenses. They still have the complete discretion over how to do that. It just says that if someone exists from Oakland to Ocean City, from Baltimore City to Beltsville, that says, hey, I have an opportunity to get into this particular space that the legislature created the opportunity. You have to let me apply, and you have to let me go through the same process that all of the existing folks in the space went through a couple of years ago. And I think that was what our legislative intent and plan was when we crafted the law back in 2021, 2022. And I would urge the committee to view it that way favorably. I'm certainly willing to amend down if we think we need to tighten the places and the type of applicants that we want to reopen the opportunities to. But I think that we need to do something and move forward with this bill to reclaim our jurisdiction over what we think we should do with sports gaming and sports gaming licensees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 797. Delegate Griffith, House Bill 792.
All right, back again. Super excited. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. Vice Chair Wilkins, when she returns. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith, represent Hartford and Cecil County, and I'm requesting a favorable report on HB 792, income tax subtraction modification, public safety, employee retirement income. HB 792 increases the maximum value of the income tax subtraction modification for public safety employees' retirement income from $15,000 to $20,000 who are at least 55 years old. As you recall, this committee 2 years ago in the General Assembly passed HB 554 that increased the deduction for military retirement income received by individuals who are at least 55 years old to $20,000. I was honored to support this adjustment, as so was this committee. And I have championed this for many years. This bill will simply bring public safety employees into line with that adjustment. Furthermore, with us facing a structural deficit and the need for long-term sustainable revenue sources being at the forefront, this bill, if passed, will serve as an incentive for public safety employees to make Maryland their forever home. In doing so, those qualifying under this extension will be lifelong contributing members of our community and will be bolstering the tax and revenue base throughout the state, thus providing stability of revenue sources. So not only will HB 792 put a little extra in the pockets of families during these hard times, but by making this adjustment, we will be investing in our state's future. We want our hometown heroes remaining in Maryland and investing and stimulating their communities and our economy. And HB 792 provides a simple incentive for them to do just that. In closing, I'd like to share that HB 792 is cross-filed with Senator Jack Bailey. Thank you, and I urge a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Delegate Griffith. Delegate Griffith, House Bill 800.
All right, back to back, let's go. Again, thanks, Madam Chair and the committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Mike Griffith. I'm requesting a favorable report on HB 800, income tax subtraction modification for military retirement income individuals under the age of 55. Currently, a military retiree under the age of 55 residing in Maryland may exempt up to $12,500 in military retirement income from being taxed, and if 55 or older, may exempt up to $20,000. As you might recall, as I shared earlier, the adjustment to $20,000 for retirees 55 and older was a welcome change in the right direction as a result of Governor Moore's leadership and, of course, the support of this committee. In seeking to build upon this, HB 800 simply removes the age barrier of 55 years old, and so all retirees can access the $20,000 exemption. Although any deduction is a good deduction, our veterans and their families have sacrificed so much to protect and defend the Constitution and the state and this great nation. They have put their lives on the line, left their families to serve, and have returned home to Maryland to start their journey again in civilian life. This simple change will allow them to access a bit more of their pension, and in turn, they will likely invest that back into the Maryland economy, whether it's through supporting small business, purchasing goods, or investing in retirement options. In these challenging economic times, HB 800 supports the Maryland economy by providing opportunity for greater consumer investment by retaining and attracting military retirees and keeping them here. Furthermore, with the ever-looming discussion of another round of BRAC on the horizon, instituting this change will further cement Maryland and this administration's ardent support and investment in the state's military community, especially when there are 38 states that do not tax Maryland's uniformed retirement pay. And I just want to get into that just for a second so people know what's going on. So BRAC, there's a BRAC a few years ago, base realignment, where they realigned the military bases and base personnel. Well, Maryland didn't fully realize that. In Hartford County, huge investments were made around BRAC relocation to Hartford County, and we never really fully realized these. There's a thing called a BRAC score that we've done a lot of research on and conversations with Department of Veterans Affairs and the military. That BRAC score evaluates, are you going to be a net winner or a net loser? Right now, if there was another BRAC, we are a net loser. And one of the big things that are evaluated right now is quality of life for veterans. Now, we've made some major strides to affect this over the last couple of years, but one of the heaviest weighted indicators is the military retirement tax. And there was a BRAC today If what's happening in DC affects here and they had another base realignment, we would lose military personnel and military installations. So this is trying to get a jump on this before it's too late. In closing, I want to thank the Maryland Military Coalition for their leadership and continued advocacy on this legislation. As a Marine Corps veteran, I'm honored to sponsor HB 800 and respectfully request a favorable report.
Okay, questions? Delegate Buckle.
And I don't know, Delegate Griffith, if you know this or not, but how many years typically does someone have to serve in the military before they get retirement and they get retirement income? Because, 55, if you have someone, I know you went in, I think you're 18 years old. And is it usually like 20 years?
So I was eligible for retirement at 20, unless you're early retired, right? So I would have been able to retire at 38. So that's 17 years that I would not be able to realize this. And if I had retired, I did 2 tours at 8 years. But if I had retired, there's no way I'd stay in Maryland because I'm not only paying the general taxes, but my pension's getting taxed, and there's 38 other states I can go to that would leave my pension entirely alone.
That was my point, because, a lot of us, I never served or applaud your service, but a lot of us in the private sector think, 55 is relative. Very few people in the private sector retire at 55, but military individuals, an awful lot of them, unless you become a very senior officer, retire well in advance of 55 typically. Is that correct or fair?
And that's exactly right. And the thing to note about that is, unless there's some serious disability issue, very rarely does a military retiree stop working. So they're going to have a second job where they're being taxed at the typical rate, spending money in our stores, investing in our community, buying homes, doing all those things. And the thing is, military retirees typically have more disposable income because of the fact they have the retirement income as well as their working income post-retirement in a regular job, government job, civilian job, what the case may be. So they have 2 full incomes, and they're going to spend it in our community, right? So that's a big difference.
Is it fair to say, I know the fiscal note says it's a $3 million potential cost, but is it fair to say that this actually has an econometric effect of where you're keeping people here, you're keeping people working, and maybe we're making more money by doing this rather than just what the fiscal note kind of does, base math?
Well, on its face, the return on investment would be 10, 20-fold, right? When you're talking about the number of veterans that would choose to make Maryland their permanent home, and we may not be able to tax their retirement tax, but we'll be able to tax all their other incomes and all the other services and all their purchases, right, the way we do. But then also, the big thing again, the storm on the horizon that people need to pay attention to, and I do believe the governor has been looking at this, is the next round of BRAC is coming. Next year, 10 years from now, it's coming. And right now, we would be a net loser. And this is, I'm telling you, I've had conversations with the Department of the Air Force, Department of Defense on this, and they have told us that quality of life for veterans is a major factor in BRAC, less than infrastructure, believe it or not. And military retirement income is heavily weighted in their reevaluation. And right now, we would be a net loser. And then you talk about a $3 million cost up front. If we lost jobs and military bases, I mean, you can't even compare apples to apples in terms of the investment.
Thank you. I appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Griffith. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 800. Delegate Patterson presenting for Charles County, House Bill 841.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Edith Patterson. I'm representing the Charles County delegation. We are asking for your support for House Bill 841. This bill simply repeals the gaming review board that exists in the county. Right now, the board has 7 members. However, they have not met because there has not been a need for the board. And consequently, to remove the board would be very practical. And we have in the bill recommends the reassigning of the gaming transfer of responsibilities to the Charles County attorney. This has the unanimous support of both the delegation as well as county commissioners, and we're asking for a favorable report.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 841. Delegate Ebersol, House Bill 922. And you have Brian Hess and Chris Adams here for questions. Yep, if you want them to come up, they can.
I just bring them up in case there are questions. Okay. You. How you doing? Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Nice to see you again. We have more gambling things to talk about. We're going to go a good direction today. We're going to talk about making people safe, okay, from gambling impropriety. This is a bill that has been introduced before. However, not by myself, but if you'd care to, play around with my name like you do so often, you could call me Delegate Attar if you'd like to this time. That would be appropriate because she is the one who brought this bill before you. If you look around the room, you'll see she's not here, and it is me. In gambling, there are things called sharps or touts. If you're not familiar with that, it's ways of getting information or guidance on maybe who you should bet on from people who you believe are smart as you are and can help you to make some decisions about whether you bet on the Eagles or that other team. I bet on the Eagles this weekend, but I did it on my own. But if somebody had told me to, I would be thanking them now. Sharps or touts are not illegal. You hear them on the radio. If you listen to sports radio, they come on. There's a guy in the morning who loves to tell you who he betted on and how he did and how he didn't do and who he's going for tonight. And that's okay. He can do that. He can even be on the radio station with a company that advertises sports wagering right afterwards. And you might think, that's great. I'm supposed to bet on the Terps tonight, and I'm going to open up a new account, and I'm going to do that. And that's okay. There's nothing illegal about that. As long as I'm generally being directed toward legal sports wagering in Maryland. There's only a certain amount of that. And you heard Delegate Buckles speak earlier about how much there is actually in this particular case. It doesn't really happen on the radio so much, but you can go online and you can get advice there also about how to bet. And on those sites, sometimes there's a link. And it's not a link to a legal sports wagering site. It's a link to another sports wagering site that's not really legal. That's unethical. That's sort of breaking the law, okay? Not exactly still. It would be breaking the law to bet with them, but they are directing you toward that. And so we have a company called, of all things, Sharp Ranks. Sharp, they're ranking sharps. Tout Rank doesn't sound quite as good, so I think that's probably why they chose the name of the company. Sharp sounds cool. And so what they can do is they can ethically look at this. They have the skill to monitor this sort of behavior. Another place it might happen is if, because when you bet, they want people to bet about the same amount on each side. They make the money the best that way. They don't really want big winners, big losers. They want people to win and people to lose, and they get their cut off the top. So let's say we're not betting on the Terps so good tonight. One of the things they can do legally is increase the payout or the odds for me to bet on the Terps so that they'll encourage more people to bet. They take a little hit there because they pay a little more money, but they have very good formulas for figuring that out. But what they can't do, for example, is if I'm on the ESPN platform, an ESPN commentator can come on and say, I think the Terps are going to kill them tonight. And then I'm Joe Schmo. I'm not really paying that much attention. I go, hey, that guy thinks the Terps are going to win. And then I go on my ESPN platform and begin betting on the Terps. That's good for them. There's a conflict of interest here, okay? And so we need to monitor this, and we need to make sure that they do. Now, the bill, as people have to say, is a simple one. It was simple to write. You can tell it's not a simple concept. But all that had to be done in the bill is a may had to be turned into a shall. That's the only word you'll see changed in the entire bill. But it says basically that according to current law, licensees of sports wagering or sports wagering groups have to employ a company that will monitor them to do this, okay? And the company that we're talking about here called Sharp Ranks is well equipped to do that. And so with that, really we just need to protect people from being sort of duped, first of all, but also for being attracted to illegal sports wagering in the state. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, questions? Delegate Buckle.
Thank you,
Delegate Ebersol, we talk a lot in this committee about the potential illegal market, people who choose to enter into sports wagering not through our regulated entities. That has some obvious negatives from a public health or ability to regulate and track. It also has some revenue negatives. Do the type of services that you're discussing, authorizing or in fact probably even mandating in the bill, do they have the potentiality to curb some of that or to steer people towards our legal group, DraftKings, FanDuel, the other platforms that exist?
In fact, platforms, I think, that had illegal gambling on their websites would be told to take them down in this case. And that would be up to the Lottery and Gaming Commission to do that. But they could make reports about this. And so it would dissuade us from being guided by sharps and touts toward illegal gambling,
So it might increase the net pool for our legal sport gambling, which has beneficial impacts for those businesses and also for our revenue, our 15% revenue.
It helps the businesses that have agreed to be in the state, okay, and work legally within our restrictions. And it also helps us because, of course, if we can get people to stop gambling with people who don't pay a percentage of their winnings to us, to get them to do so. Thank you for that question.
And then my final question is, and I think this has come up with the bill before, I know that SharpRank exists and they're maybe the preeminent operator, within this space. It's a fairly new concept. Do you think that it's incumbent upon us to sort of encourage, if we make lottery and gaming or make the licensed operators engage a service that, legally, we have to kind of say, hey, there has to be more than one bidder. We have to create a way so that it's not a sole source contract, which has a certain legal problem sometimes.
You may remember when Dahlia Tarr was in this seat last year, I sat there and asked a very similar question about competition in particular. It strikes me that this is something that we can ramp up slowly. It doesn't have to happen immediately. We can change when we make it effective. But I would suggest if you build it, they will come. This is a good market. And I will let Chris talk about it a little bit with you, if you don't mind him answering the question in part, Madam Chair.
Doesn't mind. That's fine.
But I think really the idea is, yes, it would be good to have some competition. It might be good for us, and we might be willing to amend in that there have to be more than one bid, okay, for something in this case. And we may not be there yet on that. Also, that's enough. That's the answer to the question, sir.
Thank you.
Just start. They'll get you.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's exactly right. I think when we went through this process last year, that was one of the agreed to aspects of the bill, was that there was no less than 2 licensees before this could even go into place. So on the illegal market side of things, to touch back on that really quickly, that's a really important point, because the jurisdiction does exist to affect the illegal market. And I've seen some other areas where they're going after it with credit card processors and things like that. That is because there is jurisdiction over those things. And so what I believe this is aimed to do is use the jurisdiction that exists to leverage it to the advantage of the licensees within the state, so that there are no consumer funnels for those people to go to some offshore unlicensed sports book.
If I could just read you one quote. It says, they don't want to pay taxes. They don't want consumer protections. They don't want testing. Okay, these are the companies that are offshore. They're going to continue to exist if they believe there's lax enforcement or loopholes in the statute. And we need them to not exist in Maryland.
We always struggle with that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for the information.
Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, pick up the torch. That's an important topic. I kind of pick up on the question. It seems it's like a sole contractor, sole source contract, or we have other companies doing this in the whole country.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
For the gentleman here, right? Is there another contractor are able to doing the similar work you're doing?
Yes, there is. And I think all this is doing is creating a market for existing companies who meet that criteria and companies who want to meet that criteria. It is not for one specific company whatsoever.
So, for example, if this bill passed, do you envision there are more than at least 2 companies will bid for this service, or?
It would require them to
Yeah.
take bids and then award the bid. And also, they would be regulated by State Lottery and Gaming. We wouldn't just let anybody roll in and say, we're doing a great job checking ethics here. They would vet them if they're actually capable of and do a good job of checking out ethics on companies.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Delegate Hornberger.
Madam Chair. Yeah, so we had some briefings earlier in the session about how much money we're talking about that's going into these foreign entities and sort of bad actors. Are you able to somehow quantify that for us, what we think we're losing out on here in the state? What's the dollar amount?
I can give you some back of the napkin stuff. The really tough part about this is because it's an illegal market, the size of it is really tough to gauge. What I do know from a figure standpoint, I believe the AGA put out something a couple years ago that was suggesting that missed revenue by states was the tune of $700 million. So if there's 38 states or so that are going through that, you're somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 25 million in tax revenue. I think, but again, that number could be infinity. We don't know.
And given that our sports wagering revenue is somewhere under $100 million right now, that's a pretty large percentage of it. So.
Sure. And then the second part is I know that these bad actors, they also use predatory schemes to get people to continue betting. So they'll offer a free play or something to spur that person that may be in debt, may have a problem, may not even wanting to be gambling, but they sort of get entrapped, by these bad actors. So is there a forecast that that'll go down by eliminating them from the space or making it harder for them to operate here?
Yeah. Yes. What I think the intention is to set standards so that everybody plays by standards, and those who don't play by those standards, there is tangible evidence and supporting documentation for whoever, the Maryland Lottery, the licensee, the Attorney General, to go after and make an actual case.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks for your question.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 922. Delegate Hornberger. On behalf of Cecil County, House Bill 856.
All right. Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Delegate Kevin Hornberger. Here on HB 856, and this is an attempt to garner some funding for our track at Fair Hill. I do want to point out a few things on this bill. We have drafted an amendment, which should be in your floor system there if you want to take a look at it. It actually alters the way that we're going to do the funding. And because of this amendment, it's technically not a local bill anymore. It's just a statewide bill that deals directly with state funds. So disregard the fiscal note, and we'll switch gear and talk about the amendment, which we have a number of folks here to testify in support of. The amendment takes a direct appropriation from lottery to the tune of $850,000 per year for 5 years, and issues it for track maintenance at Fair Hill. So these dollars, for the most part, are already being expended by the state through the DNR. This would just give them some breathing room to be able to have maintenance. And all of this is because we're not only operating the 5-star in this space, which is a huge attraction, an international event, but we're actually going to restart racing at the track that just got done completion, over $20 million of state investment. And we need operating money now because those races are going to start this year. So very important legislation. The funding is already occurring as it is now. This will just formalize it and make it easier for the operating dollars. So I'd love to take any questions.
Okay, any questions?
And we also have a letter of support from our county executive as well.
Okay. There is someone, Georgina, maybe, signed up favorable with the amendment. Come on up.
Okay.
Delegate Fair has a question.
Yep.
Sorry, just not a question, but because I had the trouble finding it, in your floor system, the amendment is actually under committee testimony, if anybody's looking for the actual amendment.
Okay, thank you
to
for
the
that
bill.
clarification.
Thank you, Delegate Fair. Come on.
Okay, is she virtual or in person?
Right here.
You gotta get some back of my head. That was good.
The button that says do not press.
Yeah, we got it.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Atterby and committee members. My name is Gina Mabey, and today I'm here to testify on behalf of the Cloverleaf Standardbred Owners Association, and we represent the horse women and men that race standardbreds here in the state of Maryland. Maryland is also the home of the largest breeder of standardbred horses in North America, and it's located right there in Cecil County. We support this bill with amendments, and we would like to thank Delegate Hornberger and the Cecil County delegation for working with us to ensure that Rosecroft maintains its RFRA money. And we would just like to support this with amendment. And we'd like to thank you for your time today.
Thanks. Great job.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 856. Is Delegate Spiegel here? Nope. Oh, are you here?
One of his interns. He's in another hearing right now.
Come on up. If you dare. Oh, do you not want to testify? You're just letting us know that you do want to testify? No. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. All right, when he's available, we will circle back. Okay, Delegate Vogel is not here either. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do for everyone that is here for House Bill 937 and House Bill 387. Excuse me? I thought you called me. What I'm going to do is have the bill presenters present the bills together. And then there are a number of folks signed up to testify in favor of 387. I will call you up to testify on that bill, and then the unfavorables are identical on both bills. So if you are here to testify unfavorable on both bills, you come on up and we'll give you 2.5 minutes to testify on both bills. So that's how we're going to move forward. So calling House Bill 937 and 387 to present the bills, and whichever one of you wants to kick it off, feel free.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay.
Sir, the chair just mentioned that she just wants the bill sponsors to testify first, okay? Yeah, I just want to make sure you understood, you heard it. Okay. Okay, may I proceed, Madam Chair? Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues, Chair Atterbury, and the rest of my esteemed members of Ways and Means Committee. I am Delegate Bernice Maricoux North, representing Legislative District 14 in Montgomery County, and I'm offering testimony in support of House Bill 387, the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act. As some of you might remember last year when I introduced a similar version, this bill really was inspired by my own personal journey dealing with my father being a gun violence survivor. What I have come come to realize is that it really requires the healing of the community to bring people together when it comes to dealing with the trauma of gun violence. The Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act embodies a holistic approach to gun violence treatment and prevention, addressing the root causes of gun violence while treating both the victim and the family. The Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act is going to establish 11% excise tax on the gross receipts of a federally licensed firearm dealer derived from the sale of firearms in Maryland. And this excise tax is going to further extend to out-of-state firearm retailers who have either generated $100,000 in revenue selling to Marylanders or have completed at least 200 transactions in the state of Maryland. So this will ensure that all firearms selling within the state of Maryland or to Maryland residents are subject to the tax, maximizing our profit revenue. And what's different about this year's bill is that it's going to start with the larger retailers after 2027, and then to all smaller dealers in 2028. In New York State Rifle Association and Pistol Association versus Bruin 2022, the Supreme Court confirmed the constitutionality of modern firearm regulations so long as they are consistent with the Second Amendment's text and historical understanding. So for decades, the firearm industry has been subject to a federal excise tax on firearms under the Pittman-Robertson Act of 1937. Those proceeds go to wildlife conservation efforts. But through this excise tax structure, this act is going to be designed to conform to legal precedent established with the longstanding law as well as Supreme Court jurisprudence. This bill, and if you don't have the amendments, I'm going to go over them, but it's going to fund critical services addressing gun violence prevention and treatment, including 20% towards the Coordinated Community Supports Partnership Fund under the Blueprint that deals with youth behavioral health, 4% to the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund, 4% to the R. Adams Crawley Shock Trauma Center Fund, 26% to the Maryland Violence Intervention and Prevention Program within the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, 20% to the Survivors of Homicide Victims Grant Program within that same office in the Governor's, and 26% to the Center of Firearm Violence Prevention Intervention, which is a new center from last year's piece of legislation under the Maryland Department of Health. It is estimated that it's costing us in Maryland $10.5 billion a year to address gun violence in Maryland. $383.9 million of that is entirely funded by taxpayer dollars. So gun violence is imposing an especially burdensome cost on Maryland trauma centers and Maryland as a whole. So as we're tackling the issue of gun violence, we have to embrace new programs and solutions. This bill provides funding for the recently established center, as well as the VIP programs, and we believe that this is the type of legislation that is sustaining funding for all those impacted by gun violence. We're not talking about discretionary funding, but sustained funding to make sure our victims and our families are made whole after gun violence has taken place in the community. Now, this legislation is all the more important in light of what's happening in Washington. On January 21st, 2025, the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention was disbanded, cutting off vital vital resources devoted to gun violence prevention and intervention. So as we enter an era of increased uncertainty in federal funding, creating dedicated revenue streams at the state level is more important than ever. So I'm asking for your favorable report on House Bill 387. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Me too. I'm just kidding. Got a little bit more. Got a little bit more. I got a little bit more. Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Young from the 45th District, Baltimore City, here in support of House Bill 937 and indeed House Bill 387. I want to first and foremost thank the leadership of Delegate Miracle North, who under her leadership we are here on these topics. To be abundantly clear, let me say this first and foremost, and then I'm going to talk about the bill. Every firearm is a weapon of mass destruction. I'm going to repeat that. Every firearm is a weapon of mass destruction. I know this isn't the Judiciary Committee, but I think it's important that we keep in mind what we're talking about and that we bring the seriousness to the conversation. If somebody did walk in, heaven forbid, with a firearm, one firearm, and went crazy, then that is a mass casualty potential event. And at minimum, it is a mass trauma event. And that's why I'm so excited to be here in support of these pieces of legislation, because Delegate Miracle North has, her and the coalition that she's been working with have been able to identify funding stream for the impact of gun violence. And in the 45th District, we are no strangers to gun violence. So we're seeking to make sure that these entities have this funding, especially as we consider the budget shortfalls that we face. The goal is not necessarily to discourage any individual's exercise and right of the Second Amendment. Indeed, under Bruin, that is unconstitutional. But that being said, as the delegate mentioned, there is a long historical precedent, as Bruin requires, that shows that taxation, reasonable taxation of firearms is constitutional. And so with that being said, Madam Chair, and to my committee members, I want to be abundantly clear. I'm not asking you for a favorable report on House Bill 937. I submitted this legislation specifically because in my conversations with Delegate Miracle North, I suggested that maybe we should do a sales tax. Obviously, her bill can't say excise tax or a sales tax. So we put this bill in to make sure that both options have a hearing and that both options are on the table for this committee as we hopefully move forward with House Bill 387, which I will at this point ask for a favorable report for that bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, questions. We will start with Delegate Buckle.
So thank you both my colleagues. I just have, I guess, a couple of structural questions as to how it would work. So Delegate Young, your bill is suggesting, we already impose a sales tax, the 6% sales tax on these products, on firearms, on ammunition. They're already subject to our sales tax. What is it that you're suggesting that if we took your bill, your approach of just a sales tax, what would that increase to?
12% under the bill.
Okay, so we'll go from 6 to 12. Delegate Miracle North, under yours, are we replacing the sales tax with an excise tax, or is the excise tax in addition to the 6% sales tax?
The excise tax, thank you for that question, Delegate Buckle. The excise tax would be collected from the dealers through their excise tax returns. How the dealers address collecting that money, whether they pass it on to consumers, they take care of it at the excise tax return level, that's the discretion of the dealer. But that's separate from how sales tax will work.
Okay, so are we eliminating the requirement for the dealer, for the retailer, so to speak, when they sell the product? Currently under the law, it says you have a 6% sales tax. You're obligated, as you are, if you're selling a stick of gum or any other product, to collect that 6% and to remit that to the comptroller. The dealer, the retailer, the seller has the obligation. The only obligation that the buyer has is to pay it on the final tab. Are we telling them that we're repealing that 6% and that they just have an 11% excise tax and they can choose to raise the costs, or they can choose to pass the 11% on to the purchaser? Or that's what I'm trying to get at. Is it going to wind up to being a 17% tax, or is it going to wind up just being 11%? There's no sales tax. It's just an excise tax.
No, under my piece of legislation, the sales tax is really untouched. That's why the bills are presented the way they have been. This is focusing on the actual work of the dealer to collect that excise tax. How they approach the sales tax is a different question, really a question for Delegate Young's bill. So we're not, in my bill, we're not eliminating the sales tax.
You're not eliminating the sales tax. So that's fair. So under your bill, you'd have an 11% excise tax that the dealer could adjust their prices potentially to pass the cost along. Would they have to pay the 11%? But they have to still collect the 6%. We're not eliminating the sales tax. We're not making a sales tax exclusion for firearms and ammunition. So the effective rate would be 17%. And then, as you mentioned, they already have a federal excise tax that's either 10% for what I would call handguns and 11% for what I would call long guns. So that federal tax is already on the product of 10 or 11, and then we would be imposing a net 17% excise plus sales under your bill. Under Delegate Young's bill, it would just be the 10 or 11% federal, which we don't control. You've mentioned that. That exists. And then you just tack a 12% sales tax on without any additional state excise tax plus the federal. Is that, am I getting that right?
I think I'm hearing a mixture of points. So can you say your question again? I'll make sure I clearly.
Under your bill, under both of your bills, the federal excise tax will apply.
Yes.
Obviously, we can't change that. So that's 10 or 11% depending on the type of firearm or product. And then under your bill, Delegate Miracle North, it would be on top of that 11% state excise and 6% state sales for a net of 17 or gross 17. And under Delegate Young's bill, We just have the federal, which we don't control. The federal would still be there, obviously, but we would just have a 12% sales tax and no state excise tax. Is that
Okay, so
correct?
I hear your question now. I think you're probably mixing up last year's version of the bill with this year's version. This year's version is only, for my bill, only dealing with the excise tax.
Yeah.
Last year, we had a more encompassing bill to deal with the sales tax and the excise tax. I chose this year, in light of the feedback I got last year, to focus on the excise tax. Again, this is not about targeting consumers and their Second Amendment right. It's making sure that all aspects of the industry carry some bit of responsibility towards helping the trauma of gun violence.
Okay, and I don't want to belabor it. I just want to make sure it's the 11% under your bill. It's a brand-new 11% excise tax. It's not changing the sales tax at all. So the 6%
Yes.
sales tax still stays there. That's why I'm saying
Yes.
it's effectively 17% combined state taxation on the product.
Well, 11% excise, 6% sales tax. But the sales tax has nothing to do with
You're not
House Bill
eliminating it.
387.
We kind of beat that one around a little bit just to get there. I appreciate that. And would both or either of you agree, nobody wants gun violence. Gun violence is terrible. It's terrible for people to unlawfully use guns to harm anybody. Would you agree that statistics bear out that the vast, vast, vast majority of people who lawfully purchase guns don't use them illegally? So someone who lawfully, I'm sure myself, there are other people I'm sure in this room who lawfully own guns, hunting rifles, shotguns, things for home protection, and will own them for decades and will never, ever use them in a way that causes any type of violence or harm to anyone else. Is that my reading of the literature bears that out? The vast majority of people who send people to shock trauma from any part of our state typically bought their gun illegally. They secured it somehow illegally, and they secured it for illegal purposes. They knew when they got the gun, they weren't getting it to go sports shooting, they weren't getting it to go hunting, they weren't getting it for rational home protection. They were getting it because they thought there's a pretty good chance I might use it illegally in some capacity. Is that your guys' sort of understanding of where this is coming from?
Well, I'm a data-driven person, so you have to give me some numbers to really confirm that. If that is what you heard, that's what you heard. But I'm telling you what this bill is about. It's not so much about the number of people that have the actual firearm. It's about the trauma involved, and that's costly. That's costly. And you'll hear from several folks in favor, including, I believe one of the doctors is here to talk about the cost in dealing with the trauma and gun violence that takes up resources. It takes up state resources, it takes up hospital resources, that, especially in the times that we're in now, we're talking about budget deficits we can't afford.
And the last question I have is
Let me jump in on that question
sure,
real quick,
go ahead,
Delegate,
Delegate,
which
certainly.
is to the same point about illegal firearms. While, yes, there are illegal firearms and they are proliferated, and they are oftentimes the weapon of choice that we deal with when we deal with gun violence, what we don't talk about is any sort of illegally purchased bullet. I've never heard of that. In fact, if you are getting a bullet, you're probably getting it from the gun shop. And so what the genius of Delegate Miracle North's leadership here is that even those ammunitions, even that accessory piece is going to also contribute to the funding of these programs. And so while, yes, we can distinguish when it comes to guns in some respects, we also have to keep in mind the other portions of this legislation that does take into account the fact that each and every bullet that is purchased has the potential to have a traumatic impact. And therefore, the person that is purchasing that bullet, we think, should contribute to the ramifications and the remedies therein that's necessary in our society.
I don't know if either of you know this, is my last line of inquiry. Do more people die in Maryland from automobile accidents than from being shot by a gun?
I'm not familiar with the specific data, but here's the reality. In both circumstances, people die. When it comes to cars, people have insurance that can help remedy folks and right their wrongs or make people whole. That's not a circumstance that we have currently with firearms. And that's what this legislation that Delegate Miracle North has put together, I think, would help achieve.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know the data, but I think someone from shock trauma might have that data, because I think we talked about that a little bit last year.
Right.
But I do know that gun violence is not the top reason people go to shock trauma, but it takes the longest to recover from, and that's what this is all about. about trying to get the resources to deal with that long recovery and how much resources it sucks out of the budgets of our hospitals and the like.
Do we have an idea what shock trauma's budget is? It's a
I
wonderful
don't-
place.
I don't know that on top of my head, but hopefully one of the
Yeah, if
folks
they have
from
people
will
testify,
know.
we'll deal with that with them. We're not playing get you. You guys,
No, yeah,
you
it's
guys
just
know that.
us, so we know
Yeah.
our limits.
You don't know everything about everything? I find that
yeah,
hard to
no.
believe. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Delegate Hornberger.
And it's the same question that I posed last year with this bill. So currently, if I, which I've done many times, gone to Delaware or a gun show in Pennsylvania, and I purchase a firearm, I have to have that firearm transferred to a licensed dealer here in Maryland, and then I go pick that firearm up. So it's, the way the bill's written, I don't see any changes in that practice. So my question is, if I continue to do that practice, will that act, because there's a fee for that service, will that be taxed? And then will I also have to pay any tax on the gun that I bought in a neighboring state?
Well, this bill as written is dealing with the excise tax collection. And so I do remember that question from last year. And so I want to highlight what I mentioned in my earlier part of my testimony, that we are dealing with asset purchases for firearms that are being sold to residents of the state that exceed, or the revenue is over $100,000, or there's 200 more transactions. So you can go to that dealer has over $100,000 in revenue, or has done 200 more transactions, then they'll be subject to the tax. And that's just how the legislation is drafted. So to your particular question, is it going to cost you more? That depends on the dealer and their.
No, I'm saying if I buy it out of state.
Right, if you buy it, say you have to get it registered with the dealer. That's like the last stop.
So all they're acting as is a vessel to get the gun into the state.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So no sales transaction took place in this state other than the fee for the service to be the courier of the gun into Maryland.
So under your hypothetical, remember, we're talking about under Delegate Miracle North's bill an excise tax, which is collected on the back end. So if your licensed dealer were to pass that cost on to you on the front end, I think that's something that's between you and your dealer as it pertains to your transaction. But under her bill, it does not require, and from my understanding, or mandate any additional fee that you would need to pay or taxation on that fee. And again, that would likely, if it did occur, happen as a pass-through.
And that's what I thought the answer was, but I wanted to confirm that. And my second question is going to be, these, by and large, these guns that are being purchased, they've made more than one of them. And they can be bought or sold at any location. So now we've moved from a posture of, I bought that gun in Maryland and I paid applicable taxes, versus I can drive now to Delaware and buy that same gun cheaper. And now Maryland has missed out on all of that sales tax revenue, brick and mortar presence, taxes and fees for that business, because I can buy that same gun, they made more than one of them, in a neighboring state, and now we've got zero tax dollars. Is that an accurate statement?
It's cool. I mean, I'll just bring the bill next year to add that tax.
Yes, if you have an amendment,
We can't
Dr.
effectuate
Hornberger, I'm happy to
interstate
hear it.
commerce. All right, thank you.
And we got you on the gas tax too on the way.
Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard bills like this before, and talking about taxing legal gun owners when they purchase a weapon to pay for things that are happening illegally, I just don't think it's fair. I'm being honest with you. If you want to fix this gun problem, let's fix the gun problem. It's not a taxation problem, it's a moral problem. I'm a legal gun owner, and I would love to see the violence stop, but yet we don't address that. We keep kicking this can down the road. We have tried to make a theft of a handgun a felony, and we can't even get that done. There should be there should actually be legislation that if you have a weapon and you're not in control of that weapon gets stolen, and you already knew it got stolen and you hadn't done anything, there should be something done about that.
On the bill, Delegate.
Delegate Long, do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, the question I have is, I'm just trying to wrap my head around why legal gun owners, if you could share with me why legal gun owners should be paying for the effects of what violent criminals are doing. There's no correspondence here. I just don't get it. If you can please explain that to me, I think that's a pretty fair question.
I think that's why I started with every gun, every firearm is a weapon of mass destruction and has the potential to have a negative impact no matter who uses it, no matter how legal or illegal it is. This is not a circumstance where we're talking about legal gun owners versus illegal gun owners. This is a matter of gun ownership. As a direct consequence of gun ownership, there is the potential for tragedy. And certainly there is a reason to have, and there's a right to the Second Amendment. We're not challenging that. But at the same time, we recognize the potential impact. And this legislation understands that, and it preserves the funding, and make sure that there is funding for those programs that we have to stand up as a consequence of the rights that we enjoy.
Yeah, and this is about the trauma of gun violence. You can have a legal gun owner do something illegal, and we have to consider that consequence of that, how it impacts families, how it impacts communities, how it impacts our youth in the schools. And this is what this bill is seeking to address. So it's not a penalty on the consumer and the gun owner. It's a way for the community to come together and heal our community through this piece of legislation.
I would love to see this community come together and finally deal with gun violence. It's unconscionable. I can't imagine parents that lose kids over gun violence, a stolen gun that we could have kept out of the hands of some criminals. And I've heard a lot of testimony. I just want to ask you, have you actually talked to Shock Trauma, how many repeat people they have coming in, getting patched up, getting sent back out, and just it's like a revolving door? Have you talked to them? I'm just curious.
I have not talked about that particular question, but I do remember the conversation we had about the length of stay, which really, it's still etched in my mind how long people are staying in the hospital because these gunshot wounds, because of how complicated they are. But they'll certainly be able to testify to their expert work.
Dr. Scalia is not here today, is he?
There'll be another doctor that's coming.
Okay, because I remember hearing him standing out in front of the University Hospital, says he's sick and tired. I just wonder if you possibly heard, this is a question. Did you hear this? He said he's sick and tired of patching these people up, sending them back out, and they come right back in. Well, we have to change the environment with the guns. It's not the guns that's hurting people, it's the people that's using them illegally.
So to the point that you're making, right? Especially when we talk about shock trauma, when we talk about University of Maryland Roar, the people that are there in the waiting room to help with the retaliatory violence, a lot of that funding is wrapped into the stuff that the delegate is trying to make sure is preserved. And so when we talk about the progress that we've made with the group violence reduction strategy in Baltimore City under Mayor Scott, when we talk about the reduction of violence and the reduction of homicides, a lot of that work is a direct result of the funding that we're trying to make sure does not go away under this legislation. So we need to make sure that regardless of what happens in our budget, regardless of what cuts happen, that those things, those programs that help people go from the most tragic situation in their life to now having entities and government step in to move them to a better place, they've got to be preserved and protected. They do the work in the waiting rooms of the hospitals. And heaven forbid that funding goes away and those people can't be there to make sure that the retaliatory violence that we have seen doesn't continue.
Well, one last question, if I might. Would you agree that we need stricter gun laws as far as illegals, people using them illegally?
I think that the way that we have reduced the violence in Baltimore is dealing with people directly in their circumstance, helping them move from the circumstance that they're in to a better circumstance. And when we address that, and when we address retaliatory violence in the ways that some of these programs will do and have done, that's where we see the results. We have the numbers. We see the numbers drop. All of y'all have sat here, talked about Baltimore for years. You ain't talking about Baltimore like that no more. And it's because of the work that this money will help support.
We have problems in Baltimore County. We have problems all throughout the state because of gun violence. I'm not picking on one jurisdiction, believe me. It's all throughout the state. The thing, and again, I'm going to say it one last time and then I'm done. I don't really feel it's fair that legal gun owners should have to pay for the what illegal uses are used by those guns that are stolen or whatever. I just can't wrap my head around it. And I'll be more glad to talk to you offline. I would love to be able to wrap my head around it, but I just can't. I mean, I think we all agree that gun violence is terrible. and we should work together to try to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
So I want to ask you both a couple of questions because in my other life, on another committee where I spent a long time, I did a lot of work related to gun violence, particularly domestic violence, was able to get background checks for people who wanted rifles and shotguns. So I just have a couple of questions, primarily based on Delegate Long's questions. And I guess he's saying punishing legal gun owners for them having to pay a tax, right? And so why should they pay for violence? So is it fair to say that just the mere presence of guns in a home or elsewhere, just the mere presence can lead to misuse? It can lead to use in domestic violence situations. It can lead to use in suicides. Somebody could steal the gun. Access to the gun by kids causes murders. Is it fair to say that that's an accurate statement and those guns are all owned by legal gun owners?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Okay. Is it also a fair question or a fair statement that, you know, in this committee, we deal with revenues, we deal with taxes, and a lot of taxes as a policy decision, this state has said, okay, we pay our taxes because we have these great services. We pay our taxes so we can have a great fire department. We pay our taxes so we can have, you know, great roads or whatnot for the betterment of all society. So a tax, is it fair to say that similarly a tax on or the excise tax on the ammunition or gun parts or whatever is for all of society to be safer, and we all benefit from that?
Absolutely, absolutely, Madam Chair. Got me in courtroom mode. Yes, Madam Chair. When we're now, not every single person is a victim of gun violence, but when we're dealing with the population that is and the trauma that is, if we can work on healing them, we strengthen our communities as a whole, as a larger component of our society. So, absolutely.
But you also, you know, thank God I have not been a victim of gun violence, but don't think that I don't go out with my kids to the mall and wonder if something's going to happen and how would I respond to that. I've thought about that in parks or whatnot. So it affects us all, I believe, mentally, and how the way we live our lives. You know, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that. I would not have had these same fears and same anxieties. And so do you think that is a fair statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember in 1999, the Columbine shooting occurred, and I was about to go to college, or if not already in college, and I still remember that. And that was, I lost count, maybe 25 years ago, and that was the start of several mass shootings with young people. And so, yeah, I was not a survivor of gun violence, but I felt the impact of that, so yes.
Well, I want to personally thank you both for bringing these pieces of legislation, so thank you. Delegate Fair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you both delegates for bringing your bills forward. I'm going to focus in on Delegate Merrick North's bill because Delegate Young suggested that I should. So.
Absolutely.
What is the #1 leading cause of death amongst children and teens?
Gun violence.
And do you know whether or not that number is increasing or decreasing right now?
That I do not know the answer, but I know it still remains #1.
Okay. And would you agree, there's a report that came out recently that highlighted that black children and teens had a gun death rate 18 times higher than that of white children in the same age group? Would that be something that
Absolutely.
You've seen from your own research?
Absolutely. Particularly young black boys. Absolutely.
When a child is either shot and killed or shoots and kills themselves, is the child the only person impacted by that
Absolutely
situation?
Not. Absolutely not.
Who else is impacted by that situation?
Parents, family, the community, the neighbors, for sure.
And what was the number that you gave for the financial impact that this has on the state of Maryland?
Financial impact, let's get the
Apologies.
number here. $10.5 billion a year.
So the state, and was it safe to say that the state in some ways subsidizes that $10.5 billion every year because it has to meet services for low-income families who come in without access or utilize the hospital service and unable to pay for the hospital services as they are processing these dead, especially dead children, which is horrifying.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the wraparound services that are incorporated with that in order to help the victims' families survive with this new reality.
Absolutely, yes.
And you mentioned earlier that there is a threat to the funding mechanisms that are seeking to undo the exact programs that are showing huge rates of decline in gun violence right now, that those programs are risking rate cutting. Is that?
That's right. That's
and
absolutely
so
right.
we're seeking, what you're seeking to do really with this bill is specifically support the direct services that happen to people who suffer as victims of gun violence, the wraparound services of the individuals that are struggling because of the effects of gun violence. And what you're saying to folks is your bill does not even tax the actual end user of guns. It looks instead at the retailer of that gun.
The dealer, yes. Mhm.
In order to acknowledge that gun violence has an outsized economic impact on our state.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to kind of take it from a different perspective. When we had a lot of our discussions and debate around the cannabis tax, and that we needed to keep it low to try to prevent people or not make it as much of an incentive to buy on the illegal market, because part of, obviously, the reason for legalizing is to get rid of or abolish some of the illicit market. So do you think using that reasoning would increasing the tax then create more of an incentive for people to purchase guns illegally?
Well, as my bill is written, it's not dealing with sales tax, so I find it hard to compare the cannabis sales tax to this firearm excise tax that I'm proposing, but maybe Delegate
Let's talk
Young
about
can-
a $500 gun. Right now, what is the tax at? 6%.
Usually something you said
So that puts you at $30 for that tax. I would put you at a $60 tax. So it's an additional $30. What we know on the streets right now is that the same guns are going for relatively similar costs. It kind of doesn't even make sense, frankly, unless you are prohibited to purchase on the street. Or if you, most of the time you find people purchase on the street because they either prohibited or because they just don't know no better, and don't want to go through the process that we have. Or maybe, nevertheless, when you talk about whether it would be incentivizing persons to go to the illicit market, in my opinion, I doubt it at this point, because we're talking about for a $500 weapon, an additional $30.
Okay. And then how do ghost guns and ammunition fit into this bill, or either bill?
I mean, if it's not purchased by, from a firearm dealer, then yeah, it doesn't, we haven't hit that part. So if you have any suggestions on how to add it, I'm welcome to it, but.
No, so it wouldn't help with ghost gun violence or anything like using, okay. And then is there any part of the bill, does this bill speak to discouraging illegal gun ownerships or thefts or purchases or anything like that? Is there anything in the bill that discourages that part of it?
That's not the point of this bill.
Okay. And then one more. We talked about a lot of statistics, and Delegate Merrick North, of course, you have lots of wonderful statistics. So, and it's kind of to Delegate Buckles' point, and I'm not sure if we got to it. Do you know what percent of guns that are used in crimes or crimes of violence are purchased legally or conversely illegally?
I do not have the information ready, but I'm sure I can get that to you, or have one of our folks who are testifying probably have that information.
Okay.
But thank you for that question.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The couple questions, following up on Delegate Buckles' conversation about the excise tax. In reading the bill, and it might be confusing the language from one to the other, and I understand that you don't care who pays the 11% from the testimony on the one, is, let's say a gun dealer wants to transfer a gun to another gun dealer. I can't sell this gun here. I send it there. So basically selling it to another gun dealer, retailer. Is there going to be a tax upon a transfer of a gun like that from one gun dealer to another?
Business to business?
Excuse me?
A B2B transfer? Business to business transfer?
Yes.
As written on page 8 of the bill, the tax imposed applies to a retail sale. So a B2B wouldn't be defined as a retail sale, from my understanding.
Okay, so your intention is for the bill to only be, the gun to only be taxed once. So there's no stacking.
What the
In either
retail
bill,
sale.
would you say there's no stacking of tax, or is there stacking of tax? If it's manufactured in Maryland,
No.
and then it goes to a dealer, and then it goes from a dealer to maybe another dealer, there's only one excise tax on that gun?
Yeah, that's how I'm introducing it at the retail.
Delegate Young, does your bill suggest the same?
Mine is a straight sales tax when you sell it to the consumer.
Okay. The Delegate Young, you said a $500 gun would be $30 as
An additional $30 on top of the current tax.
Right. So is that the, what do you think is the average gun sale as far as price? Like, would,
I wouldn't speculate on it.
Excuse me?
I wouldn't speculate. As you know, firearms come in many different ways, many different customizations, et cetera. I wouldn't speculate on what an average is. We could probably ask state police.
if the intention of this is because of the crime and the violence that happens from guns, would you agree that handguns are different than long guns as far as the illegal use of them?
Well, remember, the intent isn't to have a negative impact on any legal gun owner. It's also not an intent as it pertains to reducing violence. The intent is to ensure that there's funding for the programs that respond after violence. So in that regard, I think we want to make sure that we understand what we're trying to do here. There's different programs and things that focus on actual violence reduction. Is there a difference between long guns and handguns? Certainly there is a difference to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, what we're dealing with, again, is every firearm is a weapon of mass destruction. Short gun, handgun, long gun. Each and every one can kill somebody. And so as a consequence of that potential, we need to make sure that the programs that are there in the aftermath have the money they need.
Earlier, it was, asked about the cause of shock trauma. And, you didn't have the answer when I looked it up. It was automobile accidents are the #1 cause. So for you to say that the purpose of the bill is to cover those expenses, do you think maybe you missed the boat with taxing guns instead of vehicles?
No.
Okay. So understanding the leading cause of shock trauma is not what you're looking at.
But we're not responding to the leading cause of shock trauma. We're responding to the trauma after an incident of gun violence. That's what the bill is responding to. That's what the programs that the delegate has listed in House Bill 387, that's what they respond to. They don't respond to vehicles. And once again, I remind you that when an individual is in a car accident, then there is an insurance remedy for those individuals. And if there is not an insurance remedy, we have uninsured motorist coverage in the state of Maryland.
But if somebody, you're saying there's an insurance remedy there. If somebody's shot with a gun and they have health care, isn't there an insurance remedy there as well?
When I say an insurance remedy, it means that the person who harmed you has to make you whole, as you well know. And certainly in instances of gun violence, an individual is not required to have insurance to maintain their firearm. So there's not the same measure of ability or resource to make that person whole. So then that responsibility falls on the state. Delegate Miracle North has put together this bill that makes sure that the state's responsibility in funding that response is there.
Yeah, correlation of insurance, I don't think you can make it either, because with automobiles, there's no guarantee of insurance. And if somebody's using a gun for the wrong purpose to harm somebody, there's no guarantee of insurance. Let me ask the last question. I represent a rural area, the Eastern Shore, a lot of gun use for hunting and so forth. People use guns. I mean, a lot of people I know, their primary source of food is venison and other things that they shoot from game. Would you agree that most of the hunting in Maryland is done in rural areas, such as the rural counties of Maryland, as opposed to hunting for food in Baltimore City or Prince George's County or something like that? Would you agree with that?
Sure.
So with that said, the rural areas happen to be the closest to our neighboring states, Delaware, Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Would you agree that's accurate?
Sure.
So can you see the concern where our rural businesses would be impacted the greatest? Because when those folks are going to go hunting in those rural areas, they're going to step across the line and make their purchase. I mean, it was mentioned earlier about people going out of state, but with the correlation of people hunting for food, those rural areas, their proximity to the neighboring states, does that raise concern that this may have the opposite impact as to what you're trying to do?
What is the impact that you're assuming we're trying to do? Can we clarify?
If people are hunting in the rural areas more so than central Maryland, and you're neighboring Delaware and other places where Delaware, there's no sales tax, does that raise a concern at all that we're going to lose more business than we're going to gain, or lose more tax than we're going to gain as a result of this, if it were to pass?
No, I'm not concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Griffith for the last question before we move on to all these wonderful people that are here that would like to testify.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for bringing the bill. So a couple questions. I want to follow up on Delegate Hartman's line of questioning. So making the comparison between taxing a gun dealer to pay for these wraparound services, comparing it to taxing an auto dealer for providing wraparound services to victims and their families of auto accidents, right? Because there's trauma in both, right? And there's no way to deny that someone who's been the victim of a vehicle accident has significant trauma, right? So you're comparing auto insurance to this program you're trying to create. So you're saying they're going to be similar. So if that's the case, can you explain what the programs this money will go towards that would make it comparable to auto insurance?
I don't think we suggested that they were similar. I think that you all brought up, some folks in your party brought up automobiles as a leading cause of shock trauma, and we were responding to that. I'll yield to Delegate Miracle North to talk about what the bill does as it pertains to funding.
Well, I'm not sure party affiliation has anything to do with that. I think the good delegate from Ocean City just asked a couple of questions on his own. I'm asking questions on my own.
I apologize for bringing up party. I'll take that back.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
But what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is, we want to tax a dealer for the result of products that they did not sell and some of the harm it may have caused, right? Because you're taxing a dealer to help pay for services for a weapon they didn't sell.
We
right?
don't know that, Delegate. We don't know
Well, we
that.
typically know that because we're able to track the firearms and identify where they came from, and their serial numbers, identifications, and each weapon has basically kind of a fingerprint to it, right? So you can confirm generally where these weapons came from. So in the same fashion, tying it back to auto dealers and the harm that vehicles can cause, because a vehicle in the wrong hands is a weapon. Look what happened in New Orleans, right? Sure. The terrorist attack in New Orleans, where somebody took a vehicle, plowed through a crowd of people, right? Would you suggest then, under the same circumstance, that then we tax that auto dealer because their vehicle, which when turned into a weapon of mass destruction, right, caused harm, and the trauma not just to the people that were ran over, but all the people that were injured or impacted by it, people that will have a hard time walking down the street ever again without looking over their shoulder. So what I'm trying to understand is, what is the difference between taxing an auto dealer for their vehicle that may have been used as a weapon versus a gun dealer whose weapon was not used, but they're being taxed for what illegal weapons have done?
Well, frankly, Delegate, kind comparing the trauma of gun violence to the trauma of automobiles isn't appropriate.
How so? I say that because I've experienced severe trauma in my life, and my severe trauma, even if it's not from vehicles or gun violence, my severe trauma causes me to have severe PTSD from my military rating, right? So just because the source of trauma is different doesn't mean the impact is different.
Well, technically, the impact is scientifically different, especially when it comes to gun violence. And I'm really banking on the doctor that testifies, because I'm not a medical doctor. But I know that when you do have a bullet in your body, it is very not only traumatizing to see, it is traumatizing to heal from. It's been 4 years and I still remember the blood on my father's arm and the trauma seeing that, and how it did not happen at his home, but he will lock the door for over 18 months, even though the incident didn't happen at his home. The trauma is literally different. He's also been in a car accident. I've been in a car accident. We know the process. We know there's insurance, with things we can rely on. We know there's services that traditionally we've relied on to get to the point of healing. We don't know that for being a gun violence survivor. You can call the police department and ask them to help you with bills or your income, but that's a process. It's very uncomfortable. There's nothing out there for mental health services, well, at least for my father, as an example for my father. But here in Maryland, we have that. We have that through the VIP program. So that's why I say it's hard to compare, because for automobile accidents and the healing from that, we have a pretty ready-made system that we all rely on and trust on. But for gun violence victims, and knowing that there's resources out there, it is not consistent. As I mentioned earlier in my testimony, there was federal money supporting that, and now that particular program at the White House has been disbanded. And now we have many people who are going to testify today who are just frightened that the work that has actually succeeded in Maryland in reducing gun violence could be at risk, because that federal funding that helped them will no longer be there. And now here we are in the state of Maryland dealing with the budget deficit. Like, how are we going to pay for this stuff to make our community stronger? How? And it's not just the fact that we're healing the person that had the bullet in their body. We're healing the families that had to cover for rent or to get the groceries for them. These are things that's why the survivor homicide victims is part of this collection of folks that are getting the money. They face the trauma too. It is a burden that you just cannot compare the two.
Well, I would just like to say I have nothing but prayers and support for you and your family and your experience. I just want to caution that, trauma in all forms is real.
Sure.
And I think we should make sure, I just don't want to differentiate trauma in a certain way. So thank you very much.
What I wanted to share with you real quick, though, is when you purchase a vehicle, you purchase it for the purpose of transportation generally, and it's not foreseeable that that vehicle will be used as a weapon. When you purchase a firearm, it is foreseeable that that firearm will be used as a weapon. You purchase it for the specific purpose of the fact that it is a weapon.
So you're making the assumption that people that buy firearms in Maryland are intending to use it as a weapon, not for hunting and other purposes?
No.
I mean, that's something.
Let me clarify. What I said specifically, and I'll restate it, is that the purchase of a firearm is specifically purchased generally for its use as a weapon. And if it's not used as a weapon, it is foreseeable that it could be used as a weapon. As a consequence of that foreseeability, it is a it is a compelling government interest, narrowly tailored. The compelling government interest is the foreseeable outcome that could come from a firearm. This bill is narrowly tailored by specifically only taxing those individuals that are purchasing the specific instrument that could create the specific outcome that the funding would seek to remedy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you both very much.
All right.
Now I'm going to call all the folks that are signed up in favor of House Bill 387 for 2 minutes. And this is on House Bill 387 only, and then we will move to the unfavorables. Alyssa Sanders, please come up if I call your name. Alyssa Sanders, Peter Benjamin, Clinton Walcott, Joseph Sakarin, Stephanie Moverinis, Karen Herron. Okay, so ma'am, if we can start with you for 2 minutes and we'll just work our way down.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Stephanie Mavronis. I serve as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement in Baltimore City, here to support HB 387. This bill prioritizes community safety over gun industry profits by redirecting earnings from firearm sales to address the public health and financial burdens of gun violence. It's common sense that those partially responsible for the proliferation of guns in our communities who profit from harm and destruction should bear at least some of the burden to fund crucial life-saving programs that have proven themselves effective in reducing violence through the work of prevention, through the work of intervention. I cannot overstate the importance of creating sustainable funding for evidence-based violence prevention and intervention efforts, as well as victim supports. Quite simply, lives are at stake, and we've seen the benefit of this work and consistent investment in this work year after year in the city of Baltimore. As the city government agency responsible for implementation of the public health approach to safety through Mayor Brandon Scott's Comprehensive Violence Prevention Plan, MONSE partners with Baltimore's residents, community-based organizations, institutions, and agencies to stem the tide of violence while simultaneously unearthing its root causes. Baltimore and jurisdictions across the state of Maryland have proven that sustained reductions in homicides and non-fatal shootings are possible when community partners, law enforcement, and government work together to intervene in and prevent gun violence in our communities. While our progress has been made possible thanks to a one-time injection of federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, that money expires at the end of 2026. So the revenue generated from an excise tax under this bill would be allocated to programs including the Violence Intervention and Prevention Program, which helps fund community violence intervention ecosystem partners, an ecosystem that we help support. For those reasons, we request a favorable report on HB 387. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, and good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Wilkins and distinguished members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on this ongoing public health crisis of gun violence in Maryland. My name is Dr. Joseph Sakarin, and I come before you today not just as the chair of the board for Brady, but also a gun violence survivor, a trauma surgeon, and the executive vice chair of surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Our health system is home to 4 state-designated trauma centers. The Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore includes both adult and pediatric trauma centers, the Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center, and Suburban Hospital. Collectively, we care for over 34% of all trauma patients in Maryland, treating more than 9,300 cases annually. Our commitment to providing high-quality trauma care is unwavering, but the challenges we face are real, and those are the continued volume of gunshot wound victims that we see. The second is the financial burden of maintaining trauma center readiness. Unlike non-trauma hospitals, our centers require highly specialized teams that are available 24/7, a costly but critical necessity. And then the third is addressing the root cause of violence. As you heard, Johns Hopkins is actively engaged in hospital-based violence intervention programs, working with the mayor's office and others to really reduce the cycle of violence that we see. Firearm injuries remain a grave public health challenge, and in 2024 alone, the Johns Hopkins Trauma Center treated nearly 400 firearm-related injury patients in Maryland. Our recent 13-year analysis of homicides found a disturbing trend. Not only is gun violence increasing, but the proportion of patients with extreme injuries is steadily rising. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death among children and adolescents in Maryland, and each year an average of 67 children and teens die by guns, with 82% of these being homicides. For these reasons, Johns Hopkins strongly urges a favorable committee report on HB 387. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, members of Ways and Means. I am Karen Herron, Executive Director of Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence, here today in support of the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act, HB 387. Today, I'm going to focus on how this revenue would be used to further gun violence prevention through Maryland's Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention. Housed within the Maryland Department of Health, the center is already in place, but it's new, and there is still a great deal of work to do. For this center to fulfill its purpose and potential, it needs a reliable, long-term investment that allows it to grow into the hub that it is meant to be. This center will coordinate efforts across the state, strengthen community-based solutions, and ensure that resources are deployed where they are needed the most. It will help reduce duplication, direct funding efficiently, and collect data to guide evidence-based strategies. These are the kinds of smart investments that not only save lives, but also reduce costs over time. This legislation provides that investment by linking the cost of gun violence directly to its source, firearms. The financial burden of gun violence, from healthcare costs to law enforcement response to lost productivity, is borne by all of us. It is only fair that those purchasing firearms contribute to the solutions that help keep Marylanders safe. And make no mistake, whether through corrupt or negligent licensed dealers, straw purchasers, or theft or loss from sellers, gun dealers are the leading source of firearms trafficked to illegal markets. And for years, the industry has rejected modernizing systems that could assist in stemming this flow, resisted mandates that would require stronger gun store security to prevent theft, and or innovations in the products themselves that would make them safer and less accessible to non-authorized users. For this reason, we urge a favorable report on HB 387.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I am Peter Benjamin, and I'm a member of Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence. I would note that my testimony is my own and may differ from the principles that Marylanders has. To my right is the person who can correct me in case I make a wrong statement. Maryland is among the top states in creating comprehensive legislation for gun purchase, gun use, and gun safety. Despite this, it has substantial gun violence. On an average year, more than 800 people die in Maryland from gun violence. Some of the actions that we are taking to prevent gun violence and that have some of the laws that we have passed require that dealers have licenses to sell guns, that background checks be done before anybody purchases a gun, that people have purchase permits, that people have permits for concealed carry, that we have extreme risk court restraining orders for domestic abusers, that people are required to store their guns safely and securely. We prevent bun stops, they are prohibited. So are assault weapons, so are high-capacity magazines. Ghost guns are prohibited. You cannot carry a gun after a violent offense or felony. You may not carry a gun at the Capitol, at demonstrations, at bars, at schools. Those are some of the laws. We also have a very, very active violence intervention set of programs in which people try to stop the violence before it occurs. That happens most frequently with groups where you can identify what's going on. Traditionally, the costs of all of these are those that must be paid by those who benefit most from the activity. A dedicated funding source, such as being proposed here, is what we're talking about, an excise tax on gun sales. I recommend that this committee provide a positive report
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap
on
up.
HB 387.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. I'm Clinton Wolcott. I'm here representing the Critical Issues Forum, Advocacy for Social Justice in Montgomery County, a synagogue-based coalition that advocates for policies that promote Jewish values, such as those addressing gun violence. CAF strongly supports the Community Safety Funding Act. This modest tax on firearm sales is a fair and logical approach to partially addressing the high financial toll that firearms exact on our society and on all of us as taxpayers. Shifting some of these costs to the industry that creates them is simply a matter of economic common sense. Economists call this dealing with externalities, the costs that businesses create that don't get picked up by anyone else. Pollution is the classic example. It's a common sense approach that the federal government has practiced since 1919, when it first enacted a similar excise tax on guns and ammunition. I will note that that tax funds hunting and wildlife management, but is spread broadly across even those members of the gun-owning community who don't own firearms. Well, those who oppose this type of scheme say that it's not fair to force those who do no harm to pay for those who do. That's exactly how regulatory schemes that are targeted to shift costs to address a particular problem work. Employers who never lay anyone off pay unemployment taxes. They also, even though no one gets hurt at their businesses, they pay workers' compensation taxes. As I noted, gun purchasers who don't hunt pay to replenish wildlife, and I pay an insurance premium, which is required by this, which are required by the state, that covers drivers who are not insured. It's a common sense approach and we recommend a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions directed to each of the first two panelists. And so ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. What was
Stephanie Mavronis from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement.
Okay, thank you. And I tried to write it down, so I'm making sure I make sure that I have what you said right. You think that gun manufacturers profit from harm and destruction, so you want to make them pay more? Is that what you said in your quote?
I did say that.
Okay, so that you feel that these gun manufacturers sell guns legally to people that are exercising their constitutional right to protect themselves, to protect their families, or for the police, for the military that protect us, farmers that are protecting their crops. You feel like the whole reason they're doing what they're doing is because they want to profit from harm and destruction.
I wouldn't say that's accurate. That's not the whole reason they're doing what they're doing. But if I speak from the Baltimore City perspective, from a jurisdiction that has no gun stores in its city limits, and where we know most of the guns that are trafficked into our city limits may originate from legal sales, we have to be mindful of the harmful impact of those weapons.
So again, this gets back to my early points. Most of the gun violence or that you're speaking of, is that happening from legal purchases? Because I would say then the manufacturer was certainly not intending for that to happen, they certainly do not want to profit from harm and destruction, as you said. It's usually the product that they're making, which is products that can be made by anyone that can be used for harm and destruction, like automobiles that have been recently being used to devastatingly be driven into crowds of people for devastating results that caused a lot of trauma that will live with those people for the rest of their life. So are automobile manufacturers, do they profit from the harm and destruction because vehicles are used in an event like that, or when someone gets in a vehicle and drives drunk, that causes a lot of trauma for families?
I'm not speaking about vehicles. I understand your point, but I would say that we have to be really mindful of what's happening once the guns are purchased, even when they're being purchased from a legal source. All of the guns that are being purchased legally are not staying in the hands of those who originally purchased them, and we see the ramifications of that, and we see the market that's opened in Baltimore City and the harm that leads to.
Thank you. I guess we can agree to disagree. And sir, does Johns Hopkins University have a police force? Their own police force, not a Baltimore City Police, not anything. Does Johns Hopkins University itself have a police force?
Yeah, they've started a police force, correct.
Okay, why?
I mean, I'm here to testify as a trauma surgeon. I'm not here to speak about the police force. I haven't been involved in that process. I'm sure you could, have people who.
I was
from the
on
leader-
judiciary when we passed that bill. I'm happy to talk to you about it all.
Yeah.
Right, well, and you're just speaking for Johns Hopkins University is what you said at the end of your testimony. So.
Yeah, I'm speaking as a trauma surgeon, as a survivor, from what I see on the front lines. Absolutely. So if you'd like to ask a question about that, I'd be happy to answer it.
So, well, yeah, but you go in and out of the hospital?
Absolutely,
Do you want, and I imagine if someone came into the hospital with a bad intent to cause more violence, that you would want your police officers to be well-trained?
Absolutely. We support our police officers. We want them to be well-trained. We have actually weapon detection systems within the hospital, entrances to help protect our employees and our patients.
So would you be in favor of the amendment that the Fraternal Order of Police wanted to have put on, where that law enforcement officers that were buying ammunition to practice, buying guns, other guns to have when they're either off duty, that don't involve their service revolver, so that they could stay in good training, would you be in favor that they would be exempt?
I'm not ready to speak on that. I haven't looked at that amendment, but what I can tell you is I'm in favor of not having to take care of these kids that are coming through my trauma center, that are being slaughtered on our streets. And I'm not in favor of having to talk to the parents and explain to them that their child that left that morning is never coming home again. And by the way, there are more deaths in Maryland from gun violence than motor vehicles. Whoever said that wasn't true, it's absolutely false. There's about 800 deaths from firearms every year, and from motor vehicles, it's about 500 to 600. And by the way, the legislator, with all due respect, you all did increase the vehicle registration tax last year, which helps support trauma and readiness. So we did actually do things that have held those of us that drive responsible. And I think it's a dishonest conversation that if we're not really putting all the facts out there. The reality is that this is a public health problem. There is no one solution. This is not about harming responsible gun owners. I have many friends within special forces, law enforcement, and colleagues that are gun owners. I have no issue with that. It's about trying to put together a public health approach in order to make sure communities are safer. Period.
And I think, period, that's what we all want. We might go about it differently, and we're trying to get to those points and those inconsistencies. And I absolutely thank you for the service and the job that you do there, whether the person was injured by gun violence or from an automobile vehicle accident. The job that you do at Shock Trauma, it's an amazing resource for it, and I understand why we want to keep it going. We just need to make sure we have consistency in how we're applying these. And I thank you for your thoughts on that. I thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just for clarification, I'm from the Johns Hopkins Hospital in East Baltimore. We love our shock trauma colleagues that are across the way and part of the University of Maryland.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this question is going to be for the gentleman from Johns Hopkins, but maybe I maybe miss it in your testimony, so I apologize if I did. But I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about, in terms of the number of individuals that come in with trauma? And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about like the dividends of gun-related trauma versus perhaps maybe, blunt force trauma versus perhaps they were in a car accident. I'm curious if you could talk about I would love to learn a little bit more about the percentage of what is done in your department that's related to guns and other types of traumatic events.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So when you look at kind of the spectrum of trauma that comes in, there's a wide spectrum from those that have penetrating injury, which would include gun violence, stab wounds, and so forth, to those that, are assaulted, so, beaten up and so forth, to motor vehicle crashes, to people that fall and hit their head or fall down the stairs. And we take the entire spectrum of those patients. Now, in East Baltimore, specifically for the Johns Hopkins Hospital campus, what you'll see is that 80% of our patients come within a 5-mile radius. And what you'll see also, unlike many trauma centers, the majority of our traumas, about 50 to 60% in the summer, as an example, are penetrating, okay? So coming from these, either gunshot wounds or stab wounds. But we take care of the entire spectrum. And part of it, it's about providing a comprehensive approach. Part of it is treating the physical injuries and trying to make, one methodical decision after the other to save those lives in the beginning. But then it's about, I think you're asking about the recidivism, right? How do we work with the mayor's office to incorporate things like the Break the Cycle program, which is a hospital-based violence intervention program, to ensure that we don't have folks coming back in within 5 years. We know that in some communities, it can be as high as 40, 50% of re-injury, right? So what we're trying to do at Johns Hopkins is provide a comprehensive system that allows us to take care of those patients in a timely manner when they arrive, to try to take care of them when they leave the hospital and get them back to baseline, but also to provide the best medical treatment, which frankly is prevention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I would like to learn a little bit more about the process, because I imagine when the time it takes to handle someone that's facing trauma when they come in. So I'm curious if you can talk also about how long it takes to triage a gun wound versus the time it takes to triage other trauma, because time is money, right? And I know that we don't want to look at people as that, but I want to understand a little bit more, elaborating a little bit more on how much time does it take to respond to an individual that comes in with a gun traumatic episode?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So it's not really specific to, whether it's a gunshot or any other trauma. Frankly, the trauma readiness piece that you're talking about is that at a level 1 trauma center like Johns Hopkins, 24/7 capability of being able to take care of these critically ill patients. And it's not just about me, the trauma surgeon. It's about the nursing staff. It's about our anesthesiologists, emergency medicine folks. It is an entire team that gets activated when, we know patients are coming in with critical injuries. And what we do is really try to prevent the first, second, and third cause of death in these patients, which is often bleeding. And sometimes that means doing things in the trauma center. Sometimes that means getting them up to the operating room. And sometimes, that means, other ventures like embolization and so forth. The point here, I think, is that readiness, right? It's almost like being a firefighter. You never know when you're gonna get called, but man, if your house is burning down, you want people to respond. And if you get shot, you want a team there ready to be able to take care of you in a very timely manner.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate all that you do, and I think that it's important that we know medical healthcare costs are increasing, so we do need to find more ways to offset those costs, especially the burden on the state. So I think that the bill we have before us is one of those ways that we can help do that. But I do want to thank you, and looking forward to further discussion with you as well.
Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a real quick question. So, we've unpacked what this bill seeks to do. So there are several gun store owners here that would be taxed under this bill for gun violence prevention, so on, with these programs. So I guess my question is, do you feel that any of those gun store owners are responsible for gun violence in Maryland and should have to pay this tax due to their, causing gun violence allegedly under this bill?
I think it's a very fair question. I don't think any one person is actually responsible. The way I look at it is it's a societal problem. We all have to be part of the solution. If you think about other public health problems like alcohol and tobacco, right, the excise tax is not novel. We've done that in order to spread kind of, the importance of being able to take care of these public health issues in ways that the society responds to it. So I don't think any one person is responsible, and I think, again, it requires a multifaceted approach that cuts across all sectors.
Well, I guess my response to that, and my question to that is, there's no safe way to smoke a cigarette, right? You smoke a cigarette, you're putting poison and chemicals in your body, and you're creating a high likelihood of cancer. If a gun dealer sells a weapon to a responsible gun owner, right, there's not a high likelihood that weapon is going to be used in some kind of violent crime, right? When we know we smoke a cigarette, every single time you smoke a cigarette, you're killing yourself, right? So it's a bit of a difference there. And I'm not a doctor, but I assume that's probably a pretty fair assessment. But I guess I'm just trying to what I'm trying to understand is why would we tax gun dealers that are not responsible for violence, and we cannot prove they're responsible for violence, but it's almost we're assuming they're responsible, and then we're forcing them to pay, a small group of people to pay for a societal problem.
Yeah, I mean, but I could, turn that around and just say, we did the same thing on vehicle registration, right? We asked, people that drive to pay a greater amount. We increased that from 17, actually not me, you all increased it from $17 to $40 to ensure that there's trauma readiness. So there's a lot of ways that you can cut it. And again, this is not about demonizing gun owners. Like I said, I'm all about responsible gun ownership. I think all of us just have to be part of the solution. And this is just another, in my mind, way to be able to provide the type of resources that can help us ensure that we allow for the best medical treatment, which is prevention, which then, by the way, saves, the state significant number of dollars. I think I heard someone mention it was like over $10 billion a year that Maryland pays. A significant portion of that the taxpayers pay.
And I think you make a really great point. I mean, that's a very good point, that the burden to pay for societal problems around, vehicle deaths was spread amongst every single vehicle owner. Where in this bill, we're only targeting a very, very small number of, it'd be like in the same way, only taxing car dealers. Yeah. So I appreciate it. Thank you for the conversation.
Thanks so much.
Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just say I'm happy to support this bill. But I do want to just ask a question. What exactly is the outcome that you're hoping from this bill? You all, anybody can answer.
Look, I think generally it's just to keep driving the numbers of gun violence down in the state. We've seen some really positive results over the last couple of years, really seeing these programs that Stephanie was talking about and that exist in various places around the state, really starting to help get our numbers going in the right direction. And there's a real risk that these things are going to lose their funding and we won't be able to keep up that momentum. So at the end of the day, it's just to get the numbers down.
Okay, good answer. And I just, this kind of just speaks to, or I guess a little bit on, I'm a both sides of the aisle kind of thing here. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight that, like you said, one thing is not going to solve the problem. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly, that you don't think that this is the only thing that is going to address the problem. Whatever you're doing in Baltimore, please bring it on down to Prince George's County. I just hope that we leave here understanding that this is not the only answer. Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to follow up to two questions my fellow delegates asked. One of them was, what do you hope to accomplish with this legislation? And I'm sorry I missed your names. I stepped out for a minute. But the young lady in the middle, you testified that you hope to keep the momentum of gun violence down. So is your testimony that money will lessen gun violence in Maryland?
I don't think that's an exact correct way of that I'm looking at it. We are in the process in Maryland of building an ecosystem of things, of programs, of ways of treating people that is starting to work. It's everything from better behavioral health access to our violence intervention and prevention programming to the hospital pieces of things. There's quite a few, that's why I think this bill has so many different little pieces in it in terms of where the money's going to go. Sort of back to Delegate Roberts' point, there's not one solution, but these programs do take money to run, and without it, they're at risk of being derailed and potentially seeing some of these hard-fought gains start to work.
But would you agree gun violence is down across the country in all the major cities? If you look at the numbers, it's not just Maryland that's seeing this downward
So
trend?
gun violence is down. It's down in particular in places like Baltimore that are really putting resources into this type of thing. It is up in cities that are going the opposite direction, in cities that aren't funding these programs, in states that are reducing, are cutting back on their gun safety laws, for lack of a better way of putting it. In cities like Charlotte, North Carolina, those numbers are up. So we can really compare some of these places around the country, what seems to be working, what isn't working, and point to places like Baltimore as some place that is putting the effort in the right places.
Okay, and to the gentleman on the end here, Delegate Wells had asked about the amount of time it takes to differentiate a trauma from a gunshot or an automobile. And your answer was that you need certain services on standby, correct?
Yeah, that's just in regards to taking any trauma patient that comes in that is critically injured and meets certain criteria, the trauma team gets activated.
Whether it's an automobile or a gunshot?
Correct, yes.
So would you agree if in a perfect world, if gunshot wounds did not exist, would any of the services or standby service you have right now, would any of them go away?
It's not that necessarily any of them would go away if you're a level 1 trauma
So to be
center.
a trauma center is a trauma center. And to be a trauma center, you have to have certain things there, regardless of the type of injury. So if gunshots went away, the needs of a trauma center wouldn't change as far as all the standby services and the overwhelming expense of those standby services, correct?
But that's only one aspect of it. The economic burden, so we did this study where patients that are coming in that are shot, that are admitted, on average, that's $100,000, and that's just average. When you extrapolate that, okay, that's $2.8 billion. And by the way, that's not the societal cost. That's just simply the hospital cost. If you think about the societal cost, meaning being able to go back into the community and work, having to be on a ventilator for life if you're paralyzed, all those things, that's over $500 billion. So the economic burden here is incredibly significant. So you're right that you need to have the readiness piece, but there's a lot of kind of components that go into caring for these patients, including what we're discussing with Stephanie from the mayor's office about this revolving, cycle of violence that we try to minimize by implementing these hospital-based violence prevention programs.
But we can get those same outcomes from an automobile accident, a victim of an automobile accident, correct? You get the same outcome as far as not being able to work, all the societal costs and everything else related to it. I mean, that outcome could be the
Yeah, of
same.
course, you can be paralyzed if
Thank
you're
you.
not, absolutely, yeah.
Appreciate your answers.
Thank you.
I'll have the last questions here. Dr. Sakrin?
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that right? So I think some folks missed it here, unfortunately, because they had to step out. Could you repeat from your testimony, remind us the number of gunshot victims versus car accident victims? Because the statement, or there was a line of questioning suggesting that one is higher than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I was just responding to kind of some of the discussion that happened earlier. If you look at, and that wasn't necessarily in my testimony, that was in my response to one of the delegates, but if you look at Maryland, and these are, I mean, anyone can look these up, on average, it's like somewhere around 700 to 800 gun violence deaths annually. If you look at motor vehicle deaths, it's somewhere around 500 to 600. So, if to say that there's more deaths in Maryland from motor vehicle crashes is just not factually correct. The other, kind of piece, when you look at the Johns Hopkins health system and our kind of 4 trauma centers, right, we've taken care of over 400 firearm-related patients last year. So we're still seeing a significant number, and that number breaks down based off whether you're talking about Johns Hopkins Hospital in East Baltimore versus Bayview versus our pediatric center or suburban and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you all
you're
very
welcome.
much for being here. I'll call the next group of folks. Alyssa Saunders. Okay. Natalie Ibrahim. Ibrahim, Layla Gretton, Taria Stanley, Bethany Young, Adam Rosenberg. And then after this, we have like a couple virtual people after this.
Good, how are you? Good to see you again. Happy to. Good afternoon, Chair People and members of the committee. My name is Adam Rosenberg. I am the Vice President of Violence Intervention and Prevention at LifeBridge Health and the Executive Director of our Center for Hope, our comprehensive response to all forms of violence that our LifeBridge community sees. I'm here to strongly support Maryland's Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act. Since the 1850s, LifeBridge Health has been concerned with our community health needs. You have a copy of my testimony. The need I'm discussing today is our most pressing community health issue we have, that is of gun deaths. I want to point out, and you have a copy of my testimony, but I want to point out, as much of this discussion has gone, the damage and cost of gun injury and death isn't always limited to illegal gun use. Although they tend to get less public attention than gun-related murders, suicide has long accounted for the majority of U.S. gun deaths. In 2021, 54% of all gun-related deaths in the United States were suicides, while 43% were murders. Firearms are the most common and costly form of suicide. Guns, not automobiles or cancer, are the #1 killers of kids. And it's not just from illegal use, but from accidental discharge, as we saw in Baltimore City 2 weeks ago with a 10-year-old who accidentally shot herself with her grandmother's gun, and suicide. At LifeBridge, we've seen the transformative impact of a well-funded preventative safety initiative, and these face significant federal and state cuts, which is in my testimony. Our Center for Hope upstream intervention programs, such as management of our Safe Streets programs, have led to zero homicides in 4 of our neighborhoods over the course of a year. Those neighborhoods are adjacent to our Sinai Hospital, which is a level 2 trauma center, and they have seen a 52% reduction in gunshot wound admissions since 2021. These are people who are not getting shot, and they're not coming back. They're simply just not being shot. And we're not just treating victims of illegal gun injuries, we're treating all gun injuries there. We don't ask or screen if it was an illegal injury from a firearm, it's a gun-penetrating injury there. These interventions work. This is not just a statistic, but it represents saved lives and families kept whole. And I urge the committee for a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taria Stanley, and thank you so much for having me here today. I am the Regional Advocacy Manager for Community Justice, and I also sit as co-chair for Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence Coalition. Gun violence remains as one of the most pressing issues in Maryland, with devastating impacts on individuals, families, and entire communities. As we have seen across the state, gun violence doesn't just affect victims directly, it ripples through communities, creating trauma and economic burdens. Each year, Maryland experiences roughly 799 deaths and 1,765 injuries due to gun violence, costing the state over $10.5 billion annually. This crisis demands urgent action, not only through law enforcement, but through proactive, community-driven solutions. I would also like to touch on some of the questions that was asked earlier. One of them being, according to the ATF in their 2023 report, 54% of legal guns across this country are recovered by law enforcement from a crime 3 or more years later after it's been bought. And also, according to Johns Hopkins University, evidence shows that firearm ownership and access is associated with increased suicide, homicide, and unintentional firearm deaths and injuries. It's important to remember that these costs are not just numbers. They represent real lives, real families, and the ongoing trauma experienced by individuals and entire communities. This is why House Bill 387 is critical. One of the key strengths of this bill is that it generates sustainable funding for programs that directly support gun violence intervention and prevention. Programs like Community Violence Intervention, also known as CVI, which are built on proven strategies of engagement, prevention, and healing, and are effective at breaking cycles of violence and ultimately reducing gun violence in our communities. This is not just about the immediate effects of gun violence, but in investing in the future of our communities, and Maryland deserves that investment. Community Justice and the Marylanders to Prevent Gun Violence Coalition strongly urges the committee to advance House Bill 387. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Vinsky Ibrahim, and I live in Howard County in District 12A, represented by Delegates Feldmark and Hill. I am a volunteer with the Maryland chapter of Moms Demand Action and a survivor of gun violence, as well as the parent of a gun violence survivor. I am here today to express my support for HB 387 and ask for a favorable report. 3 years ago today, this very day, February 13th, 2022, my 4-year-old son and I were both shot when a group of people gathered for a gun sale that ended in a shootout at a playground near our home. This happened in broad daylight on Super Bowl Sunday. While the emotional and physical pain is something I could speak about at length, today I want to highlight the financial cost that this shooting has had on our family and the state of Maryland. To start off, there was the cost of the immediate police and EMT response to the scene, the cost of 2 ambulance transfers, the cost of my hours of treatment at shock trauma for the bullet that I still have in my leg. My son's treatment at Hopkins Pediatric ER, including surgery to remove bullet fragments from his 4-year-old arm. We must also consider the expenses of the month-long police investigation, multiple arrests, multiple court proceedings involving dozens of state employees of all ranks. All of this was paid by the state and taxpayers, which is why it's so important to invest in preventative public health approaches to reducing gun violence, like the Center for Firearm Violence Prevention. This helps us save the state money in the long run. Finally, we face the long-term costs of trauma therapy for both my son and me, as well as medical follow-ups that are still ongoing. In total, my expenses have been over $4,000 out of pocket. But my story is only a small glimpse of the overall picture. Gun violence costs Maryland $2.5 million annually. And it is the least that can be done to help remediate and mitigate the harms that firearms too often cause in our Maryland communities.
Good afternoon. My name is Bethany Young. I'm the Director of Policy and Legislation for the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. I am here to offer GOCAP's strong support for House Bill 387. GOCAP advises the governor on criminal justice strategies, coordinates across public safety agencies, and distributes funding to reduce crime. 2 key programs we administer are the Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant Program, or VIP, and the Survivors of Homicide Grant Program, or SOHG. These programs provide funding for evidence-based violence reduction initiatives and critical support services for survivors of homicide victims. And you've heard from some of our grantees of those programs today already. HB 387 would direct a portion of the excise tax revenue to VIP and SOHG. The need for this additional funding is clear. In fiscal year 2025, GOCAP received nearly $8.7 million in VIP applications, but had only $4 million available, meaning we had to deny or reduce awards for funding for promising violence prevention efforts. Likewise, SOHG, funded at just $500,000, was able to support only a handful of programs, limiting our ability to reach those most affected by gun violence. If you look at our annual reports for either of those programs, you can see that tens of thousands of people are being reached through the funding provided in these programs. With increased funding from HB 387, we can expand funding for hospital-based violence intervention programs, youth mentorship programs, reentry services, trauma-informed mental health support, family stabilization services, legal services for victims and survivors, and other critical programs. This legislation is an opportunity to strengthen Maryland's response to gun violence and provide life-changing resources to individuals and communities in need. For these reasons, GOCAP urges a favorable report on House Bill 387. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for anyone on this panel? Okay, thank you all very much for being here. Last call for Layla Gretton. Okay, we have a handful of folks here virtually. For 2 minutes, please, Kim Gutierrez.
Good afternoon, members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Kim Gutierrez, Director of Coalitions, and I'm here on behalf of the Gifford Center for Violence Intervention, which is a part of a national organization founded by former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. And I'm testifying here today urging a favorable report of HB 387. According to CDC in recent years, about 696 Maryland residents lost their lives to gun violence, and hundreds more suffered related injuries. The effects of these losses and injuries continue to ripple through communities. At the same time, gun sales have skyrocketed in recent years, with a report by the National Shooting Sports Foundation declaring that the economic growth of the firearm and ammunition industry has been remarkable. Through a variety of means, a large number of guns sold in legal markets are diverted to illegal markets and ultimately used in the commission of crimes and acts of violence, imposing tremendous human and financial costs to the state. This critical legislation would help Maryland respond to the crisis of gun violence. It would levy a modest excise tax on firearm industry profits, and these revenues would be used in the long-term investments in a variety of vital programs designed to prevent gun violence, protect and heal survivors, and promote a safety for all Marylanders. This excise tax created in this bill is both reasonable and modest, and is in no way designed to prevent Marylanders from purchasing a firearm or exercising their Second Amendment rights. This modest 11% excise tax proposed in this bill is in line with the federal excise tax of 11%. That has been praised and supported by the firearm industry itself, with the National Shooting Sports Foundation celebrating members of Congress who supported the federal excise tax, which is used to fund wildlife conservation efforts. If the firearm industry can be so supportive of a tax designed to protect wildlife, it should be as supportive of a tax that is designed to protect human life. Given the tremendous human and economic toll of gun violence in Maryland, it is a policy that will save lives and taxpayer dollars. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report of HB 387. Thank you.
Thank you. Mindy Landau for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, hi, good evening and good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and other distinguished members of the Maryland House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Mindy Landau, and I'm a resident of Potomac, Maryland and Montgomery County. I've lived and worked here as a federal employee, now retired, for 40 years. I'm a co-founder of Brady United's Montgomery County chapter and co-lead for Brady, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today in support of the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act, HB 387. Gun violence is one of the most complex policy problems of our time, but the tools to address it are within our reach. The CCSFA is an innovative bill that imposes an excise tax on firearm sales to provide sustained, reliable funding to gun violence prevention programs, including community violence intervention efforts. The revenue generated from this tax will fund a number of life-changing programs in the state, including Coordinated Community Supports Partnership Fund, the Violence Prevention and Intervention Fund, and the State Center for Firearm Violence Prevention and Intervention, which this body worked hard to establish last legislative session. It will allow for coordination with schools, community groups on the ground, state agencies, and more in identifying high-impact policy solutions to curb Maryland's gun violence epidemic. In addition to its brutal human toll, gun violence also causes enormous economic harm and imposes fiscal burdens on state and local governments and taxpayers. Available data indicates that gun violence costs Marylanders between $9 and $10.5 billion a year. Sustained reductions in gun violence will require sustained investments in prevention and intervention efforts and longer-term planning to entrench these cycles of trauma recovery, retaliation and prevention, peace building, and safety. That's why it's been a top priority for Brady, Maryland to support the establishment of a dedicated revenue stream, and we support this bill. Please, we urge a favorable report on HB 387.
Thank you both very much. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you both very much. Do we have Rachel Hunley or Michael Burke virtually?
Yes, and I apologize, my camera isn't working. I'm trying to join by phone so that you can see my face, but I am here if you can hear me.
I can hear you, but we would like to see you.
Okay, I'm joined by phone. I'm just waiting to be let in so that I can.
Oh, okay, 1 second. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Sorry. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and distinguished committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to voice my support for a policy that I believe will save lives. My name is Rochelle Hunley, and I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Engagement for Brady. I'm speaking today in support of House Bill 387. This strategic investment in life-saving programs and services not only supports prevention efforts, but also alleviates the broader societal costs associated with gun-related incidents. This bill will benefit organizations including trauma centers, prevention programs, and victim services funds that have already demonstrated proven success in reducing violence, driving Maryland's 32% decrease in homicides since 2021. Despite their success, these organizations, especially community-based organizations, often struggle with a lack of sustained funding, which is necessary for maintaining and expanding their effective programs. Supporting House Bill 387 will ensure that these initiatives have the financial backing needed to continue their vital work in reducing gun violence and saving lives. Having witnessed firsthand the positive impact of these life-saving programs, I can attest to their effectiveness in supporting communities most impacted by gun violence. When working in hospital-based violence intervention programs prior to coming to Brady allowed me to work directly with families who have just experienced the most devastating moments of their lives. Additionally, I've worked directly with communities that desperately need these resources, but often faced funding barriers. This firsthand experience has shown me the critical importance of sustained financial support for these programs, underscoring the need of passing House Bill 387. These programs not only support survivors and their families, but also equip the community with skills and fill critical gaps around mental health, housing, and crisis. Additionally, the funding provided through this bill will make a significant investment in research, helping us better understand root causes and establish best practices. By supporting this bill, we can create a more comprehensive approach to tracking gun violence and fostering safer communities. For these reasons, Brady urges a favorable report on House Bill 387. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hunley? Okay, seeing none, thank you all for being here. Now I'm going to call everyone who is unfavorable, because the list is exactly the same, on House Bills 387 and 397. So you can come and testify on both, and we will give you 2.5 minutes so we don't have to go back and forth, back and forth. So first, I'll call up Kathy Wright, Kirsten Rader, Mary Rader, John Fiastro, and Mark Penick. Okay, did I call your name? What's your name? Okay, so you're gonna wait, okay. Okay, is Alessandro Vitale here? Come on up. Okay, can we start with my right, with you, ma'am, and we'll just go down?
Good afternoon, committee members, and thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm here to express strong opposition to House Bill 387. This bill unfairly penalizes law-abiding firearm owners and youth shooting clubs. My personal experiences have shaped my perspective. I am a survivor of multiple violent crimes. My grandfather was a murder victim. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and during my teenage years, I was the victim of an armed robbery. It was precisely because of my early exposure to firearms, coupled with education, discipline, and deep respect for their power, that I recognized the gravity of the robbery. Having learned about firearm mechanics, I understood the significance of the moment the perpetrator cocked and chambered the handgun pointed in my chest. Only then did I comply. knowing that any sudden movement by him could have had devastating consequences. My experiences have taught me that the problem is not the firearm itself, but the individual wielding it with criminal intent. Statistics consistently demonstrate that firearms used in crimes are often obtained illegally and therefore would not be subject to this proposed tax. I am grateful to my parents for instilling in me not a fear of firearms, but a healthy respect for their proper use and safety. My husband and I have raised our children with the same principles. We believe in the constitutional right to self-defense, the protection of loved ones in our community, and the ability to participate in the education, sport, hobby, and even harvest associated with legal firearm ownership. Legislators should not infringe upon these rights through the ill-conceived and misguided legislation like this. Rather than imposing new taxes, I urge the committee to conduct a thorough audit of existing state spending. We must identify and eliminate wasteful expenditures. Current allocation of funds does not appear to effectively address the root causes of violence, particularly in designated gun-free zones in Baltimore City, where I live in neighboring Howard County and other areas struggling with crime. Legal firearm ownership should not be equated with activities like tobacco use, gambling, or alcohol consumption, and therefore not be subjected to similar excise taxes. I request an unfavorable on House Bill 387.
Are you Ms. Radar?
Yes,
Okay.
Ms. Rader.
Thank you. Everybody, if you just say your name, please. Thank you.
Am I okay to go? Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Kirsten Rader. I'm 15 and have been participating in youth shooting sports for 6 years with the Howard County 4-H Bullseye Club and Stemmers Run Rifle and Pistol Club's junior rifle team. I oppose House Bill 387 because it'll severely impact youth shooting sports. This bill increases taxes on firearms, impacting law-abiding citizens, not criminals. And this hurts youth shooting clubs. Minors can't buy guns, our parents do. Since parents aren't the ones competing, they will still be taxed. Our clubs will face extra taxes on firearm purchases. Our growing club needs more firearms. This tax will force us to buy fewer, impacting our ability to provide consistent equipment. Shooting the same rifle each week is crucial for the developing accuracy. Kids share rifles now, consistently readjusting sights, which discourages new shooters when their scores fluctuate. Dedicated club rifles improve consistency and allow coaches to effectively guide progress. Youth shooting sports offer vital benefits like safety training, discipline, skill development, personal growth, and teamwork. Our club already struggles with cost. This tax could force us to create a waiting list. Grant funding is decreasing and fundraising is harder. I work 40 to 50 hours at our fair booth to raise money for equipment. It is discouraging to know my hard work might just cover this new tax instead of benefiting our club directly. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Kirsten. We celebrate all youth who come down in this committee and testify, so thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kathy Wright, and I'm a volunteer board member for the National Rifle Association and for the Maryland State Rifle and Pistol Association. I'm here today to speak in opposition to House Bill 387 and 937. We don't tax any other constitutional rights. I have to ask, are the bill sponsors trying to make it too expensive for citizens to buy firearms? This could be perceived as Maryland's new imposition of a sin tax, equating a core constitutional freedom with gambling and drug use. You are essentially raising the price of self-defense out of the reach for many Marylanders. And I am confused. Delegate Fogel submitted a bill in this session, House Bill 250, income tax credit for firearm safety devices, which we supported. His bill will provide an income tax credit for the purchase of firearm safety devices. However, House Bill 937 will increase the taxes on such devices. You are making safe ownership of a firearm more costly for Maryland families and citizens. This is a punitive tax, and it will have a detrimental economic impact on Maryland's economy and jobs. When firearm stores and dealers are unable to stay afloat, there will be a loss of jobs. This bill will not solve the state's budget deficit, nor will it be able to assist with additional funding for trauma centers, trauma physicians, and violence prevention, let alone cover the administrative costs. The Maryland State Rifle and Pistol Association and the NRA respectfully request an unfavorable report on these two bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Pennock, I'm the president of Maryland Show Issue. I'm an attorney, I'm a litigator, and I've testified before this committee before numerous times. So I'd like to make 2 points. The first, and Ms. Wright touched upon it, this body may not impose a tax on the exercise of a constitutional right. Full stop. If you do, it will be challenged in court, and we will likely prevail. And when we do prevail, the state will be on the hook for massive refund liability. The case law is set out in my written testimony. I commend you all to read it. Second, and this is even more important because what you heard today was the plea that we need more money to fund all these projects. I'll be the first to say those projects are worthy. But this bill is not going to generate anywhere near the amount of tax revenue you think it will, because there's no place in Maryland that's more than an hour's drive away from a neighboring jurisdiction which will not impose this tax. Firearms can be bought across state lines. Ammunition is unregulated by federal or state law and can be bought across state lines over the counter. The Bill 387 has a limited tax on out-of-state sellers of firearms, but under Wayfair, you still have to have a substantial nexus, and most of those sellers, and there's thousands of FFLs across state lines, will not be subject to this tax. And when they are shipped into Maryland, the seller outside of the state doesn't pay any tax at all under that state's law. Now, the most you're going to have is a use tax, which is easily evaded and commonly is. So you're ending up with no tax revenue at all from those sales. Firearms and ammunition are highly price elastic, which means that they're highly sensitive to prices. So a dealer will go out of business because purchasers have very good market information about the prices of firearms and ammunition, and they will go where it's cheapest. Full stop. And that's across state lines. So those dealers will go out of business. The market right up on the profit margin by dealers, and I represent dealers in litigation, is tiny. It's wiped out their profit. I urge an unfavorable report.
Thank you. My name is Alessandro Vitale, and I'm a resident of Baltimore County. And my story is a little bit different here today because I'm here kind of to ask your help and help me with my business and help me with my goals in life and the things that I have put all my faith and effort and my financial and all my money into the state of Maryland. So I serve on the National Board of the National Skeet and Sporting Clay Association. I'm the National Director for the state of Maryland and the United States. I'm a multiple world champion in skeet and sporting clays. The state of Maryland has some of the most phenomenal sporting clays, skeet, and trap shooting facilities in the nation right here in our state. In fact, Prince George's County, the Prince George's County Skeet and Trap Club will hold our state championships this year. I'm the president also of the Loch Raven Skeet and Trap Club in Baltimore City property on Loch Raven watershed. We've been there since 1953, founded by Mayor Tommy D'Alessandro. And before that club was founded in 1953, trap shooting was the #1 sport after baseball in Maryland. And you could go to Patterson Park and watch trap shooting. So we have trap, we have skeet, we have waterfowl hunting on the Eastern Shore and all these areas. My business is called Highland Sporting Outfitters. So my whole life dream was to finally get these great dealerships of these really high-end, beautiful shotguns for clay target sports. So I don't sell ARs or handguns or handgun ammunition, but I'm focused on clay target sports that many students at Washington College buy my products, U.S. Naval Academy, the University of Maryland, a lot of people. We have 8,000 visitors a year that come through Loch Raven Skeet and Trap Center without any issues or problems. I'm personal friends with Dr. Tom Scalea and Kevin Sowers. Kevin Sowers is the CEO of Johns Hopkins. Tom Scalea runs shock trauma. He saved my father's life. And he will tell you that none of the weapons, as they're called, or shotguns that I sell or am involved with have anything to do with the violent crime. More importantly, my business just opened January 1st. And I waited until last year. We had the contractors, we had our lease signed, our lease almost signed, and we waited until this committee shot down that tax. So then I pulled the trigger and we worked really hard for now almost a year to build my facility. And I owe $1.5 million to banks, investors, and my landlord. And now if this tax gets imposed, the average cost of one of my shotguns is around $5,000. We have guns that are as much as $50,000 that are competition shotguns, and my customers will go across state lines now to be able to purchase that. So, asking for your help.
Questions, Delegate Vogel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for the benefit of everyone here and for clarity, I know you invoked my name with my bill, which I'm happy to have your support on it. That is to promote safe storage of guns. I don't think that has a direct conflict with this bill as it's being sponsored. That's at least the sponsor's position on the bill, but yes, isn't that so?
May I say something? I thought that House Bill 937 was the sale of firearms, ammunition, and accessories, whereas 837 is just firearms. And accessories is considered safety devices.
Oh, can I get my mic again? Thank you. So to clarify, my bill is specifically incentives for gun storage, safe gun storage, gun safes, and gun locks. It is not for any additional, it's not a tax credit for firearm purchase, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The young lady representing the NRA. I just wanted to ask you. Yes, 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 yes. How are you? Would you say that the NRA gets a bad rap? A lot. Would you say that the NRA gets a bad rap a lot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would you like to change that?
Well, sure.
Okay. What's wrong with, supporting a bill that would create a fund designed to save lives? Like, people hate the NRA, people love the NRA. Is there any way that the perception, like if this could change the perception of people's, the way they feel about the NRA, do you think that would help?
Ma'am, I don't know anything about the mechanics of a firearm to respond to that. However, following the Civil War, the generals from the South came to the generals in the North and said that our soldiers, the generals from the North came to the Southern generals and said our soldiers were very dangerous. They couldn't hit a broadside of the barn. They wasted ammunition, they were unsafe, and they shot each other. You're from rural America, where your soldiers were more attuned to use of a firearm. And would you please teach us firearm safety and marksmanship? In 1871, that's when the National Rifle Association was established, when those soldiers, those generals came together. To this day, that is the same mission for the National Rifle Association, to teach firearm safety and marksmanship. And we are defending that right to this day.
And yet, there's another opportunity to support something that would be more positive, that would even put your organization possibly in a better light, right?
We're trying hard.
I understand. I guess I just want to find out, is there a way or is there something that you may, or, I know there's something you wouldn't agree with in the bill, but is there something that would make you supportive of the bill?
I am supportive of every effort to protect citizens. And if they are injured from any kind of violent crime, I want to see that our trauma centers are fully funded and able to take care of our citizens. And yes, we need to teach safety to our children, and we need to fulfill the laws that are in place to make sure that those who commit crimes are subject to those laws.
Okay, and thank you. And I'm very supportive of small businesses, and so I do understand your plight in this. I kind of like to see where people can kind of come together and kind of work together to kind of make, because, no bill is perfect and no effort is perfect. And so it's kind of like, are you willing to come to the table or even talk to, try to work things out in the meantime? I understand. I mean, and it's not necessarily really a question. I'm just making a suggestion, because our businesses are the backbones of our communities, and I understand where you're going with the challenges. I'm a small business owner myself, and, I just want to put that out there.
I mean, if I can just say that I think one of the biggest differences is that I support everyone in this room. I think we're all on the same page about safety and about violence and all those sort of deals there. But Maryland is such a small state, and my business is such a niche market. If you look at my website, highlandusa.com, and you look at that and look at that store and what we have in there, and the fact that no one who's going to spend $7,000 to $10,000 for one of my competition guns is going to buy it from me. They'll go across the line to Delaware. They'll go to Pennsylvania. They'll go to West Virginia. They'll order it online and buy it from Texas and send it into a Maryland FFL and pay $50 and have it transferred to them. And that tax was either zero or paid in another state, where that revenue is completely now lost out of Maryland. And I have certain sales goals that I need to meet just to pay payroll and my rent and my obligations to my investors.
Sure.
And they're all like very worried and upset. And it's like, you better go down to Annapolis today. I'm not into politics. I don't come down here. And they're like, you better come down, because come April or whenever this might come into play, you could be out of business. So that's my concern. It's just that if we were, the entire country had the same tax and it was an even fair playing field, absolutely. Then I'll say tax it to hell and back and we'll add it all into a fund, and that's great. But not when I'm 18 miles from the Pennsylvania line, an hour from Delaware. It's just not fair.
Thank you for that perspective.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is for your constituent from Howard County, the young lady that participates in, I'm sorry. The young lady from Howard County that participates in the 4-H shooting club. I appreciate you bringing, to our attention the fact that this bill would cause implications for you as a competitive shooter because of the situation of your age and everything. Do you have any other your 4-H club members here with you today?
I do. I have one of my best friends, Natalie Hanyok. She's in the audience. It's her. She is the treasurer of our 4-H club.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you for being here and taking a role today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any for Delegate Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the gentleman, just out of curiosity, do you know the tax rates of the surrounding states? Because I live close to West Virginia and Pennsylvania, very, very close.
0 in Delaware, 0 in West Virginia, minimal in Pennsylvania, but they can also go to 0 tax states like Florida. My competitive dealer in this region is actually in Vero Beach, Florida. That's how cool my store is and the money that we spent there. And anyone in this room can buy the same thing from Vero Beach and pay 0. And I have to give you about a 5 or 6% discount, hoping you'll buy it from me because I'm close by and I'm local and I can give you that service. And then they'll just pay $50 to transfer it, even to me. So you can buy the gun from Vero Beach, Florida, a beautiful shotgun, Clay Target Sports, nothing that's used in Baltimore City crimes, and have it shipped to me, and I make $50 to transfer it to you, and you bought it from Florida and paid 0 tax.
All right, thank you, and thank you for being here, and good luck with your business, and thank you, young lady, for being here and sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
Any further questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you all very much. Next, Mr. Fiastro, Tom DeBolt, John Pica, Matthew Pica. John, is it just you? Matthew.
Yes, Matthew, with your permission, he won't be here.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, okay. Christopher Kopacki? Christopher Kopacki? Okay. John Jocelyn? And the last person I have in person is John Weber. Okay. And then I think we have one virtual person. So can we start to my left?
Madam Chair, my name is John Fiastro. For the record, I'm here on behalf of my client, Benelli. Joining me today is Mr. Tom DeBolt of Benelli. He will have his own comments. He is here at my request. He is not a registered lobbyist. I just did want to respond to a few comments that were offered earlier. The suggestion that this tax offered in two different bills was not novel. Well, in fact, it is, and you heard from the previous panel that, you know, that this was, would now be treating firearms as a vice. That is not treated that, firearms are not treated that way locally or regionally in the states of Delaware, District of Columbia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or West Virginia. While those jurisdictions do have different tax regimes for different items, they do not tax firearms differently. So indeed, it would be novel. It would be new to the state. The suggestion that, and it was offered very early this afternoon in comments by the minority leader, that this is a stacked tax and could have an effective tax of 17%, where one does not currently exist on long guns. Combined with the federal number, that would be a total of 28%. My client, Benelli, produces high-end long guns. And if you were to apply that tax rate against their products, entry-level products of about $2,000, you're talking about another $220 in expected tax payment. So to underscore Mr. Vitale's comment a little bit earlier, he said that those folks would leave out to go out of state to go and make their purchases. And that's not hard to imagine. You know, oftentimes customers will partner purchases of ammunition on top of their firearm sale. So an average order of $5,000 to $10,000 is not unheard of. With this new tax regime, we can see that that type of purchase would yield a $500 and up type of tax payment for the buyer. So it is expensive. And I know from myself, personal experience, I drive short distances to save a few pennies on my gasoline. But when you're starting to talk about $1,000 at a pop, people are willing to make the drive out of state to make these types of purchases. And to underscore what Mr. Vitale said earlier, it can be shipped, the product can be shipped from out of state FFLs to in-state FFLs, and for that $50 transfer fee, the total tax can be avoided. So with that, Madam Chair, I ask for an unfavorable report, and thank you for the time of the committee.
Thank you very much for having us here today. I appreciate the opportunity. This is not the first time I've testified on behalf of our industry and our companies, but my name is Tom DeBolt. I'm the CEO of Benelli USA and president of Stoger Industries. Along with our sister company, Beretta USA, all three companies are headquartered in Maryland. We're located in Prince George's County. We also have operations on the eastern shore of Maryland. As currently written, House Bill 387 would arguably impose 11% excise tax on the majority of retail sales of firearms sold by licensed dealers in the state of Maryland, and House Bill 937 would be a 12% tax on firearms, ammunition, and accessories, which would be passed on to the recreational shooters and hunters in our state. These sportsmen and women are law-abiding citizens and have a strong heritage of enjoying shooting sports and engaging with friends and family in healthy activities that include the responsible use of firearms. These excise taxes would put hardworking Maryland-based sporting goods businesses at a competitive disadvantage to retailers in surrounding states that do not have the additional tax. These retailers already face a challenging environment when consumers can drive across state lines and take advantage of lower sales tax rates on major purchases. These bills would create a larger gap for these dedicated retailers to remain competitive and operate within a fair environment. The increased tax rate brought on by these bills will result in lost jobs and lower tax revenue when these businesses are forced to downsize or close their doors. While we understand and sympathize with the use to which these taxes would be applied, there is something fundamentally unfair to law-abiding residents of the state who alone would have to pay for the cost of firearm misuse by criminals and other persons whose conduct the law-abiding residents neither condone nor control. All Maryland residents suffer from the cost of firearm misuse. We believe all should contribute equally to address these costs. I'm a longtime Maryland resident and outdoorsman. On behalf of the employees of Benella USA, Stoger Industries, and Beretta USA, I implore the committee to vote against these bills.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, John Pica on behalf of the National Shooting Sports Foundation. I'd like to take a look at the drop in murders in Baltimore City. From 2019 to 2024, there's been a 41% decrease in murders in Baltimore City. That's not as a result, and there was no additional tax on firearms. That decrease in murders is a direct result of the policy of Mayor Brandon Scott. I've listened to individuals, both proponents of the bill and a couple legislators, talked about creating a fund for shock trauma. It sounds to me like it's a hospital issue, not an issue that should be levied on the people who own firearms in Maryland. Just a small, minor tweak to hospital reimbursement rates would take care of the funding for shock trauma. There's already a markup on hospital rates for uncompensated care. That would solve the problem for shock trauma without taxing individuals who own firearms. 30% of Maryland citizens own a firearm in Maryland. This is not a general fund tax. This is a specific targeted tax. So that's why it's different from a motor vehicle registration increase in the fee, because everybody who buys a motor vehicle uses the roads. This is a tax specifically targeted to gun owners in Maryland, and there's no connection between the shock trauma victims and the individuals who buy their firearms after passing a criminal background check. You mentioned, Madam Chair, about children who have access to firearms. There's a good suggestion I have for that. You know, the law on access to firearms has a penalty of $1,000. That's it. So if you want to increase the penalty for access to firearms for children, that would be a good vehicle to do it. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Jocelyn speaking for 2A Maryland in opposition to House Bill 387. Said that nothing's impossible for the person who doesn't have to do it. We've heard what we have to do with the tax. What we haven't heard is what the comptroller's going to have to do. There's a staggered implementation. If you're over 20,000 square feet, you have to pay sooner. The comptroller is going to have to survey 760 FFL dealers in the state of Maryland to determine which ones are over 20,000 square feet. Because this bill seeks to impose the will upon other contiguous states, the comptroller is now going to have to survey over 6,400 FFL dealers in the contiguous states. Further, It would be interesting to see what the attorneys general would say in the adjacent states when our comptroller tries to come in and enforce a tax law upon a state in which they have no jurisdiction. I don't know that this has been tested, but it certainly would make for an interesting case. You've heard that it'll reduce our income. I believe it will. I believe the overhead on this, the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze. We're going to end up having people go out of state to purchase. That's going to reduce shop income, which is corporate tax, shop owners' income, which is income tax, the number of employees they have, there's another income tax we're going to lose, the sales taxes we won't collect. If these two bills pass, we are looking at a combined tax rate, including Pittman-Robinson, of over 34%. It's 11% Pittman, plus the 6% we already have, plus 11% on that, plus another 6%. That really gets to the point where you have to wonder what's the real purpose of this legislation. We have no issue with public safety. But since everyone benefits, then everyone should be paying their fair share, not just one select group. On 937, the accessories that will be taxed, a handguard, you can buy that anywhere, in-state, out-of-state. A grip, again, anywhere, inside state, outside of state. Or a magazine loader, little piece of plastic. Buy it anywhere, in-state, out-of-state. These are the things that these bills want to tax. We really have to wonder what the true purpose is. We ask for an unfavorable report.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is John Weber, and I represent the National Rifle Association and our members in Maryland. The NRA is opposed to HB 387 and 937, bills that would levy additional taxes on transactions involving firearms, ammunition, and accessories. Firearms and ammunition are already subject to an 11% federal excise tax through Pittman-Robertson, along with a variety of other state and local taxes and fees. California is the only other state to enact similar legislation. When this legislation passed in California, Governor Newsom labeled it a sin tax and showed the Second Amendment community what his true thoughts and intentions towards law-abiding gun owners are. The NRA has challenged that suit in court, and we will do so if this bill becomes law. This tax is regressive. It will disproportionately impact those who follow the law. Criminals operate in black markets where goods are untaxed. Meanwhile, the honest citizen faces another barrier to legal firearm ownership. Additionally, Maryland being a small state, transactions will be driven away, businesses closed, and it will have an effect on the economy of this state. Excise taxes on firearms don't just affect manufacturers and retailers. They hit law-abiding citizens. These taxes also impact items people will use to buy, to train, and be prepared with their firearm. These taxes elevate those costs, potentially pricing out those who wish to legally own a gun for self-defense, sport, or as collectors. These taxes also jeopardize funding for conservation by causing people to purchase less of the items that fund these programs. This legislation is not about generating revenue or public safety. It's about limiting access to a fundamental right. This tax should be seen as nothing more than an attack on the Second Amendment and those who exercise their right under it. We respectfully request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Do we have Michael Burke virtually? He's the last witness. Was that a yes? Okay. Bring him in. Okay, Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke, are you there? Okay. I don't think he's physically there. He's not responding. I don't think he's there, unfortunately. Okay, so that concludes the hearing. Okay, we can't hear you and we cannot see you. We'll give you a minute, okay? We will give you a minute to try to figure this out. Let's just give him a minute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, can you
Yes, ma'am.
do you have a video? A camera?
No, apparently it's not picking up, and my apologies.
Okay, we generally require to see your face, but go ahead for 2 minutes, please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Michael Burke out of Baltimore, Maryland, a military veteran, over 20 years in federal and state law enforcement, and a citizen of Baltimore County. You've heard a great deal of testimony from people on both sides of the question about the valuable services that this bill would support. The problem is, as in the last 10 panel members, there won't be any income for those benefits as implemented. The sponsor of these bills essentially are asking the citizens of Maryland to pay a 40% tax on a firearm or ammunition. That's 11% federal, 6% sales, 11% on one bill, and then 12% from the other bill. So that would be a 40% tax on each transaction. First, that will disproportionately affect the most disadvantaged people in this state, the residents of Baltimore City, minorities, blacks who want firearms for self-defense to protect themselves against the violent crime that we're all agreed we are opposed to. But this will put those people at the greatest disadvantage, your constituents, your taxpayers. You're asking a minimum wage employee to pay 40% tax on a handgun to defend herself and her family in Baltimore City. And you apply the inconvenience of, as was mentioned earlier, there are no FFLs in Baltimore City. So she has to transport herself out to the county, but she can't even do it on public transport because she can't bring a purchased firearm home on a city bus or train. All the implements that all the obstacles that these bills produce will simply interfere with the safe conduct of a constitutional right. We might as well reinstate, in the democratic tradition of Maryland, the poll tax and charge people for signing up to vote, and then apply that poll tax toward these benefits or these programs. Hospital expenses are paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. They don't need additional money from this tax revenue. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearings on House Bills 937 and 387. Calling House Bill 801, Delegate Spiegel, and whoever you have with you.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, members of the committee. I know you all have had a long afternoon of hearings, so we appreciate
your patience and attention. As the old expression goes, it's good to give somebody a fish, but it's better to help them learn how to fish. And that's why I've been such a strong advocate for financial empowerment programs to address the negative impacts of decades of systemic racism, lack of access, that have contributed to the generational wealth gap and to cycles of debt. And while other financial literacy programs focus on providing financial education in the academic environment, in K through 12 programs or in universities, this bill is designed to provide financial empowerment services primarily to adults out in the community who have not had the benefit of that education or of access and opportunity when it comes to issues of debt and credit and personal budgeting. We have a substantial population of residents, many of whom are minority and immigrant, and many of whom live and work in disadvantaged communities, for whom access to and education about financial services has historically been denied. Now, direct aid is obviously important, and it aligns with our values as a compassionate state. But as a matter of equity, it's also critical to provide the tools and educational resources that can help address the root causes of poverty. If we want to have a more permanent impact and make more progress in addressing that generational wealth gap and those systemic barriers, we should also be investing in financial empowerment programs to give Marylanders the support to build financial stability for a lifetime and then pass on those benefits and lessons to future generations. House Bill 801 establishes a financial empowerment center pilot program to operate across the state. What exactly is a financial empowerment center? Well, during my time in municipal government, I helped lead efforts to partner with state and local nonprofit and private sector and government partners to build a program that provides people with several sessions of free, hands-on, one-on-one financial coaching, often in multiple languages. The Gaithersburg Financial Empowerment Center also measures its own effectiveness by collecting and analyzing anonymized data from its clients. And with that data-driven approach, we've seen the truly transformative impacts of these services for families. In just the first year, one local center helped clients achieve hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt reduction, as well as hundreds of thousands of new dollars saved by establishing savings accounts and budget plans, as well as a significant increase in credit scores and many success stories like saving for a down payment on a first home, or being able to send a child to college, or eliminating a crippling debt. It's not theoretical. These are real, measurable, life-changing metrics, and that was just for one center in one city in 1 year. Another local financial empowerment center is up and running in Baltimore, and we understand that Howard County is working to set up a center as well, and Howard County Executive Calvin Ball has been a big supporter of these programs too. A couple local centers is a good start, but we need to expand this opportunity across the state, and we can do so efficiently through the Comptroller's Office by adding financial empowerment to their menu of public-facing services. I want to note that we managed to get the fiscal note for this bill down to 25% of what it was last year, and it's a relatively small investment given the big impact of these programs. In addition to the direct impact on clients, there are ripple effects on our state and local economies as families have more funds to spend in the community, and the promise of relief on the budget pressures of our social safety net as more people start to attain more financial stability and independence. Under the bill, the pilot is required to start in fiscal year 2027 and run for 2 years, but the Comptroller's Office is advising they can begin it in fiscal year 26 with a contract position for a certified financial empowerment coach who could travel to appointments throughout the state. The Comptroller has expressed support for this concept, and as you can see, we have a number of great organizations and officials supporting this legislation. So given the transformative impacts on people's quality of life and future economic opportunities, as well as the long-term benefits to the state, I respectfully ask for a favorable report on HB 801. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Wilkins, and members of the House Ways and Means Committee. I am Rockville City Council Member Adam Van Greck. Thank you for this opportunity, and we are thankful to Delegate Spiegel for sponsoring this important legislation. The Rockville Mayor and Council unanimously supports HB 801. This bill would establish a Financial Empowerment Center Network pilot program to provide one-on-one financial counseling and coaching services by a certified financial empowerment counselor, including how to increase savings, pay down debt, improve credit scores. These services are urgently needed by our most vulnerable residents who are experiencing disparities. Previously, the City of Rockville implemented its Bank on Rockville program to help provide our residents with more pathways for economic self-sufficiency. It was an outgrowth of the nationwide program established by the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund, as a program that is based on its updated best practices. Rockville's program increased the financial capability of residents experiencing fiscal difficulty by providing education and access to resources. Program outcomes are centered on increasing the number of vulnerable residents that are connected to safe and affordable bank accounts and decreasing the number of residents using costly financial services, which are often predatory, and boosting the overall financial literacy and capability so that they can participate in our economy. It is our sincere hope that the Financial Empowerment Center Network pilot program will become permanently funded statewide program that will help financially stabilize the unbanked and underbanked in our Maryland communities. HB 801 is an important first step for the personal safety and stability and economic growth. For these reasons, we urge the committee to support the bill.
Vice Chair Wilkins, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 801. My name is Lona Muckle, and I'm the Senior Policy Associate with the CASH Campaign of Maryland. CASH stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope, and we promote the economic advancement for low to moderate income individuals and families in Maryland and in Baltimore. More than half of our clients earn less than $20,000 a year, and many earn less than $10,000. CASH has been a long-term supporter of local financial empowerment centers by helping them get established, training navigators, and participating on steering committees. We recognize FECs as key tools to improve liquid asset poverty, increase access to affordable credit products, and give residents more access to financial counselors and coaches. CASH knows that financial counseling and coaching works because of our free financial services that we provide. 49% of our clients see a reduction in consumer debt, and 71% of our clients have seen an increase of their credit score by an average of 39 points. All Marylanders should have access to education and knowledge that will help them overcome current financial barriers and help them make good financial decisions in the future. CASH also staffs the Financial Education and Capability Commission, which is co-chaired by Delegate Stein and Senator Brooks. One of the commission's goals is to monitor the implementation of public and private initiatives to improve financial education and capabilities of the residents of the state and to provide recommendations to the General Assembly. Last year, commission members voted to support legislation on increasing financial empowerment centers through the state. So for these reasons, we strongly urge a favorable report of House Bill 801.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and esteemed committee members. My name is John Sanchez. I'm the program manager for the Gatesville Financial Empowerment Center. I'm employed also by Housing Initiative Partnership. Housing Initiative Partnership develops innovative, affordable housing that renew neighborhoods and equips people to achieve their housing and financial goals. I'm honored to speak before you today in support of the Maryland Financial Empowerment Center Network Pilot Program, as outlined in the Bill 801. As someone who has witnessed the transformative power of integrated financial counseling, I can attest that it's not just about providing advice. It's about building pathways to lasting financial stability and empowerment. Let me share with you a couple of inspiring stories from our Gatesville Financial Empowerment Center. Let's consider the story of a single man who was once overwhelmed by debt and have a low credit score. Through dedicated one-on-one counseling, she learned how to consolidate her debt using affordable financial products from local credit unions, develop a realistic spending plan, and significantly improve her credit score. Today, she's empowered to negotiate better terms for any future financial needs, securing a brighter future for her family. In other instances, an individual facing long-term unemployment leverage our center comprehensive approach. How? By connecting with vocational training and scholarship opportunities. He transformed his prospects by building a budget, boosting his credit scores, and ultimately securing a stable, well-paying job. These stories are not isolated, right? They represent the power of a model that seamlessly integrates financial coaching. By expanding these services, the data-driven model statewide through the bill, we are empowering every Marylander to overcome financial barriers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Please
for your
wrap
time.
up. Okay, thank you. I think we have heard from this entire panel, so we'll go to questions. Delegate Patterson.
Here, and I thank you very much, Delegate, for bringing this to our attention, this proposed bill. It's very interesting and very intriguing and certainly is needed. My question is, are there any current agencies or programs that are covering what's proposed in the bill? For example, Mr. Sanchez, your Housing Initiative Partnership, Inc. How is this different from what is being proposed?
We are contractors of the city of Gatesburg. We're the providers. Currently in Maryland, it's just the Baltimore City, FEC, and Gatesburg. There are a lot of financial empowerment centers around the DMV area, but not under this unique model that is data-driven and is connecting with all the local services that cities provide. So it's an integrated system when it's just not a regular financial counseling or coaching services.
And I know, Delegate, you indicate that the comptroller would determine the number of pilot programs. Is that correct?
Yes, Delegate. Thank you for the questions. And if I may just also add to the last question, obviously the city of Gaithersburg already has its empowerment center. The city of Baltimore has a center. The idea here, of course, is to provide that service to those who can't already access those two particular local centers and expand the program. But to your other question, the comptroller, we decided intentionally to make it a part of the comptroller's program so that we weren't micromanaging exactly how this program was going to work, given that the comptroller has other public-facing sort of retail consumer educational service programs. We thought it would be a good fit, but we didn't want to try to micromanage and say, you must do this many, you must do them in these locations. We thought the agency was in a better position to be able to make those decisions and that we would delegate that ability to the comptroller's office. But as I mentioned, the comptroller's office has indicated to us that their vision for how to do this pilot on limited resources would be to have one person who could travel around to appointments, on designated days in different parts of the state would be the most efficient way to do it. Originally last year, this is the second year we've brought the bill. Last year we suggested that maybe we could use the regional offices of the comptroller as brick and mortar locations for clients to come in and meet with folks, because she has 11 offices around the state, as I'm sure you know. But hiring 2 or 3 or 4 financial coaches as opposed to one who's traveling around would be more expensive.
Absolutely. But thank you very much. And I can put in a plug for my Southern Maryland. We certainly need something like this. So thank you very much for bringing it back to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Seeing no other questions, that ends the hearing on this bill. There's a virtual witness? Okay. We'll bring in our virtual witness if they are in. Angela Lowry, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Lowry. I'm the manager at the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund, which is a national nonprofit that provides local governments with technical assistance and funding to embed financial empowerment strategies into municipal infrastructure. I'm here to discuss our Financial Empowerment Center model, which supports cities and counties in providing free one-on-one financial counseling as a public service for all residents 18 and over. Since 2012, the CFE Fund has worked with over 50 local governments to replicate the FEC model, helping them plan for and launch FECs, including 2 operational FECs in Baltimore and Gaithersburg, and a 3rd in the planning process in Howard County. Nationally, FECs have served over 180,000 residents across the country, helping clients reduce non-mortgage debt by almost $300 million and increase savings by $57 million. The FEC is a government-led initiative. While many FECs partner with nonprofits to actually deliver the financial counseling, one aspect that makes the model unique is the role government plays in providing strategic oversight, connecting the FEC to other services, and ensuring sustainability. Other core elements of the model include individual one-on-one counseling delivered at no cost, full-time counselors professionally trained according to national standards, and a data-driven approach that uses our customized Salesforce platform to track financial outcomes. Importantly, FECs are integrated with other nonprofit and government services, maximizing their impact. And here in Maryland, we already have 2 powerful examples of what that can look like. Baltimore is focused on embedding financial counseling within the city's workforce programs. So for example, as someone goes through workforce training, they can connect with a financial counselor to create a budget for their new income or establish direct deposit. The city also recently leveraged their FEC infrastructure to connect financial counseling to support services available to Port of Baltimore workers. In Gaithersburg, as you heard, the FEC supports broader housing and home ownership priorities through both nonprofit and city partnerships. Expanding the FEC model across Maryland would build on this success, leveraging existing national resources and a proven model. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for your patience today. Any questions for this witness? All right, seeing none. Now that ends the hearing on this bill. Thank you so much, Delegate, for bringing it.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
We'll now call up the next bill, House Bill 891, Delegate Vogel. In person, we should have Rebecca Snyder, if you're here. And then there are 3 virtual witnesses, so we'll go through in person and virtual, and then we'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, committee members. This is the last bill, I believe. No, it's not the last bill. Regardless, I'm going to do this as quickly as I can for the benefit of all of you, especially Delegate Patterson. So don't say I don't do anything for you, okay? House Bill 891 is the local newsroom tax credit. Newsrooms across the country are closing, and it is a crisis for democracy. When newsrooms close, communities are less informed. Government officials like ourselves are held less accountable. Folks are less aware of what is happening in their communities. We have higher levels of partisanship and misinformation spreading across our communities. And we are seeing this here in the state of Maryland and across the country, where since 2008, 57% of newspaper newsroom jobs have been lost. 2,900 local newspapers have closed across the country, and thousands of communities have been left without their local newsrooms. We need more journalists in our newsrooms doing this important coverage, keeping us accountable, and keeping communities informed. What this bill does is establish a refundable payroll tax credit for 5 years. The first year of up to $25,000 and $15,000 in years 2 through 5 for each full-time local journalist hired. We're going to encourage, incentivize local newsrooms to continue their hiring and keep the lights on in newsrooms and keep all of our constituents informed. With that, I urge a favorable report on House Bill 891.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Vice Chair Wilkins. My name is Rebecca Snyder, and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, D.C. Press Association. Thank you to Delegate Vogel and Delegate Foley in absentia for bringing House Bill 891, which we fully support. Luckily, the statistics that Delegate Vogel cited are not quite as dire in Maryland as they are across the country, but I do have some informative links in my testimony where you can really hear more about what's happening. In Maryland, however, we are seeing our newsroom shrinking. We haven't had closures. We don't have any jurisdiction without a publication and news coverage. But the fact of the matter, it is difficult to maintain newsrooms, certainly at the level that they were. And you'll hear from additional panelists on that. This is a bill that will benefit every news media organization in Maryland, both for-profit and nonprofit. The for-profit entities will have the income tax credit. The nonprofits will have the payroll tax credit. So it fixes one of the inconsistencies and issues with the New York legislation. Maryland would not be the first to do this. New York and Illinois have both passed legislation to provide support directly to newsrooms. And we think that this is important because reporters are the ones out there doing the coverage. We want to make sure that whatever support is given directly benefits newsroom positions and news gathering efforts. So I will leave it to our other panelists to talk a little bit more about the national landscape and then also what's happening directly in particular newsrooms. But I would ask for a favorable report. We're happy to discuss or answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's move to our virtual witnesses. Let's go with Pierce, Wilson, and then Schluss, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Matt Pierce. I'm Senior Policy Advisor for Rebuild Local News. We're a 501c3 nonpartisan coalition of publishers, journalism unions, philanthropists, and business people. Together, these groups represent more than 3,000 newsrooms and 15,000 journalists, including many in Maryland. We develop and advocate for public policies that strengthen community news. As the business model that once supported local journalism has collapsed in recent decades, refundable employment tax credits like HB 891 have emerged as one of the most popular public policy tools to support local journalists and to promote job creation while protecting editorial independence. As was just mentioned, the states of New York and Illinois enacted journalist employment tax credits last year. Right now, lawmakers in the states of Washington and New Mexico have already proposed similar measures this year. This has become a popular program in Canada as well. So it's simple economics. If you want more professional journalists covering Maryland communities, make it cheaper to employ more of them. HB 891 does that. The benefits of the tax credit approach is that it's broad-based, efficient, and honors the First Amendment's prohibition against content-based discrimination. Newsrooms don't have to worry that a lawmaker they've covered skeptically is going to be picking and choosing who gets support and who doesn't. We would suggest making this bill even more future forward by maintaining the $25,000 per journalist subsidy for newsrooms that maintain or grow the number of journalists covering Maryland. So we recommend a favorable report on HB 891. Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, is that me? Hi, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify virtually today on behalf of HB 891. I'm Jordy Wilson. I'm the publisher of the Frederick News Post. I'm on the front lines of trying to balance and maintain a local news organization in the face of daunting economic challenges. We operate a daily print and an online paper. We operate a commercial printing business. We've built a performance marketing agency, and we built a digital marketing agency with a national footprint. And we're just barely staying ahead of the wolf at the door. I've submitted written testimony. Today, I'd like to share a little additional context. We are awash in information, but less and less of the information that's flooding our screens is the kind of reliable reported journalism our communities need. We all know news organizations are going through tremendous transformation, and our business models have been hollowed out by the rise of digital media and the consolidation of ad revenue among a few massive tech companies. That's the big picture. What it means is that every year it's harder for companies like the Frederick News Post to maintain a newsroom capable of delivering the local news that Marylanders need to make informed decisions. This legislation will strengthen our communities by bolstering the organizations that report news across Maryland. Some background has been touched on. From 2008 to 2020, according to Pew, U.S. news organizations shed 30,000 newsroom positions, a 26% decline. The losses at newspapers, which still produce much, if not most, original news, especially in places like Frederick, have been even more dramatic, dropping about 60%. Jobs have grown at new digital organizations, but they're struggling too to make this work, and those new positions have come nowhere near enough to compensate for the losses in the other traditional news gathering organizations. As we all innovate and try to find new ways, we are all, still grasping for ways to sustain the newsrooms our communities need. This will be meaningful support at a critical time. Thank you.
You can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. My name is John Schlois. I am the president of the News Guild CWA. We're the largest union of journalists in North America, representing 27,000 members. I'm here to urge you to also favorably report out HB 891. As folks said, it's a really great method and mechanism here to create a tax credit for journalism jobs, which we've lost a staggering number of. Since 2005, the U.S. has lost more than 3,300 printed newspapers across the country. And as Mr. Wilson just said, we've lost 60% of our editors, reporters, and other journalists, 45,000 jobs in just the last two decades. News deserts, or areas with little to no news outlets, continue to expand. There are 206 U.S. counties with no local news outlets. And on a per capita basis, Maryland actually ranks near the bottom of news outlet density. Maryland ranks 46th among states in the Washington and D.C. area, which is 1.48 news outlets per 100,000 residents. Every layoff, every buyout that journalists face, every closure of newsrooms destroys another community across our country. Each journalist loss means another important government meeting like this one goes uncovered. We lose local business coverage. We lose high school sports coverage. Each journalist loss chips away at our ability to know what our government is doing and to see ourselves, our businesses, our families, our lives reflected in the pages of newspapers and online websites. We need HB 891, similar legislation. As you heard before, was already passed in New York State and Illinois to help support the jobs lost and make sure that we retain journalists and hire more. I urge you to favorably report out HB 891. Thank you so much for your time, your support. This is critical to our democracy.
Thank you again to this panel. Do we have any questions? All right, seeing no questions, that ends the hearing on this bill. Thank you, Delegate Vogel. Okay, the final bill today is my bill, House Bill 708. It's a sponsor-only bill, so I'll just take the bill from here in the interest of everyone's time. So this begins the hearing on House Bill 708. Good afternoon, committee. Wonderful to see everyone. I am Delegate Janelle Wilkins. I'm pleased to present House Bill 708. HB 708, Earned Income Tax Credit, Individuals Without Qualifying Children. This bill expands the eligibility of the EITC by raising the maximum income requirement for single filers and allowing certain individuals without qualifying children to claim the Earned Income Tax Credit. We've heard this bill several times before, and it would adjust the credit for inflation each year as determined by the Comptroller of Maryland. As you know, the EITC is one of the best poverty-reducing measures that the General Assembly has at its disposal. It is estimated that every dollar the state spends on the EITC, $1.23 comes back to our local economy as recipients spend it on necessities such as groceries, housing, transportation, and debt. This would bridge financial gaps for Marylanders and make the credit more valuable to our lowest income earners. I urge the committee to give a favorable report on House Bill 708. Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none. That ends the hearing on House Bill 708. Thank you, everyone. That ends the hearings for today.